off our work session and very pleased to be able to have this conversation with members of the Department of Transportation. Todd, do you want to start off with introductions of the purpose and let the DOT people introduce themselves, and be kind if they could turn on their screen so we can actually see what they look like. That's always a nice thing.
Yeah, they are.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Barney. Tonight's purpose of tonight's work session discussion here is to bring the council up to speed on the current status of the plans for the Capitol Crescent Service Trail Phase 2 project, which will extend from effectively the north side of Elm Street Park down 47th Street, across Willow, and then extend out to Wisconsin Avenue. The plans are at about 90% right now. I believe the current schedule, and Kevin and Andy can bring you up to speed on that, is construction is anticipated to start this summer at some point. Perhaps it'll extend into the fall potentially. But key to this and why the council is engaging in this issue is because the CCST Phase 2 will utilize portions of the town right of way, primarily along 47th Street and across Willow. And the purpose of this discussion is bringing you up to date on those plans. And later this evening, we'll also be discussing a memorandum of understanding with MCDOT regarding the use of the right of way for these improvements. And with that, I'll introduce you to Kevin, who is an engineer with Montgomery County Department of Transportation Planning and Design. He is the project lead for the CCST Phase 2, and Andy Conklin is the engineer of record. Andy, your firm, it escapes me now.
You're fine. Whitman Record Associates.
Thanks.
Yep.
So with that, I know the town's been engaging on this matter for the better part of 2 years or so, reviewing the plans, discussing the use of the town right of way for the CCST Phase 2. If you could bring the council up to speed in relatively short order on what changes potentially have been made since the last plan, or just to review the plan itself along 47th and across Willow, so the council can get an understanding. We have 2 new council members who've just joined us recently and were elected to the town council. And just for their edification, if you could bring them up to speed on the plan, just a brief description of the plan and what it does into the town right of way from the north side of Elm Street down to Willow and out to Wisconsin would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just make sure I'm clear. So the only person from DOT is you, Kevin, right?
Yes.
And then Andy and Jameson, you're both with Tool Design, is that right?
Jameson's with Tool. I'm with a firm called Whitman Record Associates.
Okay, so 2 different consultants.
But Jameson and I are working on the design together.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't see.
And you are not Chris's son or relative, I take it.
No relation. No.
The only time you've been asked that question. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see Jameson on the line. I missed it, Jameson. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. So go ahead, Andy or Kevin or whomever would like to start.
Yeah, we've actually prepared a short.
Could you speak up, please, Kevin?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Well, now I can, yes.
Okay, yeah, so we've actually prepared a short PowerPoint presentation just to kind of go over what's changed between the 60% and the 90%. So I will go ahead and open that up just so we can see apples to apples exactly how things have progressed. So if we start the presentation here, this is pretty much the main intersection we're looking at, just on Street View now, with this street being Willow Lane, 47th Street onto this side, and then Elm Street Park further down to the left of the screen. So like Todd introduced us earlier, I'm with Montgomery County, Andy Conklin with WRA, and Jameson with Tool Design. And today we'll basically just be going the design updates between the 60 and 90%, the Pepco overhead pole relocations that are also going to be happening before we start our construction, as well as when we expect construction to kick off and finish for this section of the trail. So with that, I think the first design update here, we see an overview of the different elements that have changed from the left on the 60% side to the right on the 90%. And then as we walk through each of these highlighted areas, We'll see it again at the end, just so we can see again clearly the scope and the intersection changes that we've developed since 60%. So with that, I will first hand it off to Andy to kind of walk us through those design changes.
Yeah, so I guess Kevin, if you go back a slide, it may be helpful. So I think the biggest change, and I know Todd, we've communicated this to you, but I think the biggest change between the 60% and where we're at now is we have effectively eliminated the work on Willow to the west of 47. So in this view, we're north is basically to the right, going up 47th to the right there. So the 60% is there shown on the left. And at that point, we were working to take the CCST off-road onto a shared use path along Willow. The big change that's happened here is we've coordinated, or the county has coordinated with EYA, and they're, I'm sure everyone here knows, but they're doing the Farm Women's Market development. And basically, when we coordinated our plans with them and had some meetings with them, they basically said that they were going to be having to rip up everything that we built along Willow when they start their construction, because they're going to have temporary supportive excavation right up basically to the right-of-way line. And that is basically right in the middle of the proposed path that we were going to build. So knowing that EYA's development's obviously coming after the CCST, but probably not far after, the county DOT decided to eliminate that portion of the work from our project, understanding that it will still be built by EYA under their project. So that's the big, obviously here, you can, if you look between the left and the right, you can see the big change there. So as we end our project, going from Elm Street Park over to Willow, we will be basically moving people into the existing bike lanes along Willow after they get off the portion that we're building at the southeast corner of Willow and 47th there. If we look at the east side of the intersection, or the bottom of the screen, on the left side, so that'd be the southeast. Yeah, you can probably go to the next screen, Kevin. I don't know if you show that in the...
Again, just to reiterate what Andy was saying, here you can just kind of quickly see the different work limit of works between what was proposed at the 60% and now at the 90%. And then again, just tying into what Andy said, originally at our 60% design, we had these two bike lanes going out opposite directions, whereas here in our 90%, we are pretty much maintaining what's there now. So then passing it back off to Andy here.
Yeah, so thanks. So the southeast corner here, the left side was our 60%. And there, again, we had the shared use path going up along Willow. And when we crossed the Farm Women's Market driveway there, we had the pedestrians and the bikers that are using the shared use path separated, going across that driveway and making the turn to cross Willow there. Obviously now we don't have them, or the bikes are in the road as they are today. And we also are very cognizant to minimize our work within the parking lot because of the future EYA development. So we've pushed the shared use path that we're building to the north there. And you can see our curb bump out. We're effectively reducing the width of the road at the intersection about 4 feet to 20 feet there. And that gives, we're mixing the shared use path, or the bike lane and the sidewalk at this corner here. And as they then traverse the corner and go across Willow there, they are together, going into the northern leg of that intersection. Again, that you can kind of see the we really shrunk our footprint there. We tried to shrink our footprint to avoid getting into EYA's area and then them having to obviously rip up everything that the county builds 2 years later. And this does affect one parking meter, I think one town parking meter, which we've had conversations with Todd about. I think it removes a parking meter along Willow, but yeah, you can go to the next slide there, Kevin. The other big change we've had is 60%. We had a very narrow shared use path as we went from the Willow Lane road crossing into the shared use path going up along 47th. We've had a lot of coordination with parks, really good coordination with parks actually. And we've expanded the footprint of our project at this corner of the park to make a plaza area basically. And what this effectively is trying to do is give a bigger area for bikes and pedestrians to mix here, and also to try to encourage pedestrians to use that new pedestrian or the expanded kind of asphalt paths that are going to go into the park. So they, if people are coming from the EYA, the new EYA Farmers Market, or just down from the town of Chevy Chase, they can walk through the park instead of having to walk along the new CCST with all the bikes. So we've really tried to expand the footprint of the landing area here and also make more direct paths within the park to encourage walkers or families with young children to use the park and hopefully have a little safer condition on the trail. You can kind of see there in the bottom, in the right view, the 90%, you can see the dashed lines there. Those are the new asphalt trails or asphalt sidewalks that are going to be built within that corner of the park to provide a more direct access to the trails that are there today. And again, you can kind of see there the expanded footprint of the landing area of the plaza there. This is basically showing the signing and marking. That is going to be, well, the left is obviously our 60% when we had the trail along Willow. Again, the main change there is we're reusing the existing bike lanes along Willow, and we have the green pavement markings to get them across the Farm Women's Market. And the point of those green pavement markings in that diagonal shape is to hopefully funnel the bikers to use the new ramp and path that's going basically around that curve, and hopefully minimize how many people are going to cut across that intersection at a diagonally. And I'm sure obviously that'll happen. But we've tried to show them with pavement markings that the safe way or the ideal way is to obviously go back south a little bit, get into that protected space, and then cross Willow at a 90-degree angle. Jameson, if there's anything I missed with the pavement markings, feel free to.
No, yeah, I mean, that's it. That you got it. It's just to encourage people to use that crossing and to kind of communicate that the pedestrian crossing is being prioritized over the bike crossing. And yeah, so that's the idea behind it.
So the other big change we've had from 60% to 90% is we've coordinated our project with Pepco. Initial conversation with Pepco when this project kicked off years ago was that they were going to stay, their overhead lines were going to stay on the east side or the park side of 47th Street. And their existing lines are basically shown in red there where Kevin has his cursor. So obviously having the overhead poles right in the middle of the new shared use path, the Capitol Crescent Surface Trail, not ideal. So we were going to be shifting those lines slightly to the west, but still on that side of the road. That would actually make us relocate an underground sanitary sewer, which is that orange line there, to get proper space for the poles to avoid interfering with the existing sanitary sewer. We were going to have to relocate the sanitary sewer further into 47th. However, the big change here is that Pepco ran through their preliminary design, and they're working on final design now to actually relocate the overhead lines to the west side of 47th Street, or the non-park side of 47th Street. And that's the blue. Basically, it'll be overhead. The overhead lines, there's the solid blue lines, and then they'll connect to the overhead lines that are down on Willow Lane today. And it'll be underground from there's a very top corner of the picture there where the Pepco is underground along Elm Street. It'll feed that first pole to an underground with underground conduits, come up that pole, and then go down the west side of 47th Street, like I was saying. So that's actually Pepco's preferred design, and like I said, they are working on final design. Hope to get their design here in July and get them working in this summer, so that we basically need them to move before we can really start construction of the surface trail.
So yeah, so like Andy was saying, part of what our construction would need would be for Pepco to finish their overhead pole relocation. With our final design for phase 2 expected around the end of this month, Pepco's final design we're expecting around the early July, and then it would take them about 10 weeks to assign the work. And then assuming a 2-week construction schedule, again, pending their outage schedules, we optimistically are saying that they should be done around mid-September, which would push our expected construction start date to fall of this year. And with about a 6-month construction timeline, would put the finish somewhere around the spring. So then that would be our schedule for the expected project. Again, coordinating with Pepco to make sure that they're finished their work before we come in and start doing ours. And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Sure, we have some questions. I'd like to ask one clarifying question first, then turn it over to my colleagues to ask the questions they have. And we have just over 15 minutes before our regular council meeting starts. To be clear, this phase ends when you get basically to Elm Street. It does not include the final curves that would take it to the portal. Is that right?
Yeah, so this would be the phase 2 finishes right at the promenade of the Elm Street Park.
Got it. Okay. It does not include the part that's going to curve behind the new playground and go to the portal. That would be a
Right,
separate
so
conversation.
that section of the trail we're calling phase 3.
Fair enough. Okay, good. And the only other clarification I'll make is we in the town are very well aware of the Farm Women's Market project. We're providing $7.5 million to the park to be built. So we're completely in accord with postponing any final work on Willow until that project is undertaken. It would obviously be silly to have work done that has to be torn up. So that in itself is clear for us. With that being said, let me turn it over to my colleagues. Any questions?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
After you, Nina, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This has been really helpful and illuminating. I had questions mainly around signage. So if what was in our packet showed the kind of the sign, if you will, western part of Willow Lane, it has a turning vehicles effectively stop for bicycles, stop for pedestrians. As you know, we're on the eastern part of Willow Lane. It's a 2-lane road, unlike what's happening on the western part of Willow Lane. And obviously this is a big convergence area for bicycles, pedestrians, and cars. I was wondering during the design process if there was any discussions about like walking bicycles through that intersection, just to provide that extra layer of safety rather than just allowing the free flow, knowing that there's going to be eventually lots of kids going and their families going to and from various playgrounds. Just wondering if that had come up at all and was tossed aside for whatever reason.
Sorry, just to clarify, the direction that walking the bicycles across, are we saying across the parking opening here?
You mean catty corner? What were you referring to?
Well, I couldn't hear the question. Sorry.
He was asking to clarify your question.
Yeah, so the sign itself is up, I mean, it's not depicted on your sheet, but it's depicted on ours. And Todd, maybe you can point to that. It's
I can
page 3 of our packet.
share the signing plans. I've requested to share, but I don't.
Okay, let me just stop sharing altogether. There we go.
You pull that up here.
This is our
Right. So
hopefully.
at the top, if you scroll down, if you will, a little bit more, at the top of the sheet, there's going to be turning, it's an upside down sign for us. This is turning vehicles as if you're coming from Wisconsin and you've taken a left onto Willow Lane, or right, I guess, stop for bicycles and pedestrians. There's a sign at the top of our sheet, which is not being depicted right now on, so if you go up, there you go. You see that? So
Yeah,
people are going to see, go ahead.
That's an existing sign, I believe, right, Jameson?
It is, yeah, it is. That was installed as part of the previous phase 1 of CCST. Yeah.
Right. So considering how busy this particular intersection is, my question is, was there a, first question, was there a discussion about having a sign that says walk your bicycles through this through this area instead of riding?
I don't recall anything about that on, at least on our end. But the intention of that sign is to basically give priority to bicycles and pedestrians and just alert vehicles that might be turning into, I think that's another entrance into the parking lot, right there. So I think the idea being that CCST is such a heavily trafficked bicycle route that we want to give bicycles and pedestrians, priority and right of way essentially right there. So I don't think that there was ever any discussion about bikes dismounting, because that would just be disruptive to the flow of traffic, like high volume of bicycle traffic on CCSC.
And on the eastern part of Willow Lane, and I don't know if this is a town thing or a county thing, would it be a good idea to replicate that sign that we're all talking about on that side? Because it's a lot of traffic coming onto the eastern part of Willow as well, and it's a two-way road. We are narrowing it at the intersection itself. So I was just wondering if that's something to discuss with you, to discuss with the town, because I don't know who owns what on that part of Willow.
I think it could be, well, I guess it may, well, okay, so that's that intersection is stop controlled. So I guess the reason that we have that sign previously is because that isn't a stop controlled intersection, or it wouldn't be a stop controlled movement to have those cars turn into the parking lot. But if you go down further to the intersection, you could potentially add another additional sign to, warn motorists of the high volume of pedestrians and bikes, but there's already a lot of signage around in that area. So they could, add to sign clutter. But I don't know that it would be, I don't think that we would be opposed to it if the town or the county wanted to add an additional kind of warning sign.
Okay, thank you.
Carla?
Yeah, my thanks to the presentation and just to the project in general. I'm one of the new council members, so coming up to speed on this, but spent some time studying it and generally very pleased. I actually think there are two comments I was going to make, and one of them is addressed by I guess what you're considering an interim situation where the bike movement from Willow eastbound to the trail on 47th looks like it'll be a lot more natural than the configuration, the 60% drawing, which required the bicyclist to cross and then make a sharp 90-degree turn. So in actuality, I think those bicyclists, and I consider myself one of those, may either use the street or cut across the corner anyway to use the shared trail. So I actually think this is an improvement and addresses one of the questions I came into the evening having. The other question and concern that I have, and I read back through the town's comments from about a year ago, is the concern over the pedestrian bicyclist conflict, which we talked about a little bit already tonight. And you continue to use the expression shared trail, which gives me concern that it will be used by pedestrians even as we try and encourage them to take other pathways. And the other pathways that exist right now would require pedestrians coming from sort of the playground area to sort of track to the east, if even though their destination is maybe to the new development. So I'm concerned that regardless of the signage that we might put there, pedestrians, children, people pushing carriages, all that sort of thing will use the shared trail rather than the asphalt sort of curved walkways in the park. So what I'd like to ask about, if there's been any consideration to replicating the sidewalk that exists today. The park is sort of bounded by 4 concrete sidewalks, and it makes it very clear when you're trying to navigate as a pedestrian along the streets that the concrete sidewalks sort of indicate that's where to go. And if you're going into the park, you know, you take the asphalt walkways into the park itself. So as I looked at the plans, and sorry for being so long-winded, but I just want to give you some context, and then I'll stop and have you address that. You're planting some replacement trees. I think 7 yeah. And it just seems to me that there's an opportunity to recreate a sidewalk for pedestrians just east of that new stand of trees. And that way pedestrians can be separated from the bike trail all along 47th Street and not be tempted as much to share the trail. So can you address that consideration?
We've obviously been coordinating with parks for the entire project. This idea did get raised a little bit, maybe not as direct as you were saying, to basically do a sidewalk next to the shared use path or into the park. I think parks would say, and obviously I can't speak for parks, but they don't want to give up any of their park, right? So we are putting our lights just barely within the street right away. I guess just to get to the point, I don't think parks would approve giving up another 5-6 feet of the park for a sidewalk.
Well, if I could just follow up and say, I find that unsatisfying, particularly if, you know, concerns that some of us have that I think are legitimate, is the pedestrians will be in conflict with bicyclists going on the trail. And you're using existing, we have this amenity now without the conflict with bikes. Seems like there's real estate to do it. And I think it would greatly enhance safety, including at the intersection of Willow and 47th, where if you had a pedestrian sidewalk, you could keep that pedestrian movement from interfering with the bikeway, unless, of course, you're crossing the street at Willow on the, I guess, north side. So there's a way to sort of completely keep pedestrians separated from bikes, as is the case further west on Willow and elsewhere through Bethesda. I think it's a question worth asking directly of the parks to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Kevin, thank you for scrolling over. I think the intent of those, and I know it's not the most direct route, but the intent of the new asphalt sidewalks that are shown in dashed lines there, and then it ties into the existing ones, which you can kind of see in the light gray lines, is to encourage people to have a more direct path, and without not being on the trail, obviously, direct path to the park. And I think, that was Parks' compromise, because they understood those concerns as well, to encourage people to use the existing park paths instead of the trail. So I mean, I think it is relatively direct. It's not as direct as a parallel sidewalk, but we can certainly raise this with Parks and get their thoughts. But they've been very, I guess, reluctant to give up any more of the park than is required. It's a very important park for them, obviously.
I think adding that second sidewalk path really conflicts with Parks, with their wanting to keep basically their aesthetic of the tree-lined path on either side, but also the size and the actual age of some of the trees directly adjacent to the path itself, I think causes Parks to have some sort of Parks to have some reluctance.
Oh, it just went 10 minutes.
And I guess
Well, thank you. If you would just, again, I'm a new member, I understand that. I've also, last comment I'll make is pedestrians will take the shortest path available to them. So, my concern is that there'll be a lot of pedestrians on that trail shared with bikes, and a rather easy solution to that would be to return a condition that we currently have in the town. We're giving up a lot to make this happen, and I think if we could get that sidewalk back, it would make me feel that we've got a better situation. So thank you for considering my comments.
Yeah, I understand. And I guess just to think about this at a bigger scale, once we get to the portion of the Chapel Crescent Trail being built by Purple Line, obviously they'll be mixed, right? There's no separate along the CCT all the way to Silver Spring. There's no obviously separate sidewalk. So hopefully the bikes, if they're coming from Purple Line, are already used to the pedestrians being within the trail and are going at a safe speed. But
Sure, Rich, please go ahead.
I agree with Carlo. I think the town has always expressed its concern about the pedestrian bicycle interface. And we looked originally at keeping a design which kept the bikes and the pedestrians separate. I don't even see markings on your drawing that show where the bikes would go versus where the pedestrians would go. You call it shared use, but having a distinction there, like you completely taken away the green crossings at the intersection of Willow and 47th. And there's no such markings anywhere along that new path that you've put there to delineate where bicycles should be. And, at a minimum, if you can't put in, like Carlos said, give us the sidewalk, I would like to see a separation of a marking separation for where pedestrians and bicycles should be going on that stretch.
Recording in progress.
So are you wanting a separation along the CCST along 47th?
Along 47th, along that, you've got where your sidewalk goes along 47th and then curves onto Willow. You've got the small curve there. Having some kind of designation on that, if you're not going to give us the sidewalk, have a designation so that it clearly shows where the bicycles should be. The density of the traffic you're going to get of pedestrians isn't going to be coming off the Capitol Crescent Trail. So the riders in the Capitol Crescent Trail are kind of not germane to the situation we're going to have in the town when those parks get built and when the development gets there. It's going to be a very, very pedestrian-centric area. And we've always expressed our concerns about keeping separate the pedestrian and bicycle traffic. So I don't see how you've done that.
Andy and Kevin, would it be possible for you to ask the parks one more time whether or not they would be okay with no net loss in green space? I mean, obviously, we're creating these connections here to existing pathways, but if we eliminated such pathways and created a more linear sidewalk somehow through this area that would connect to the gazebo and then carry on up to Elm and tie back in, is there any? Would it be possible just to pose the question to parks if there's no net loss and we eliminated some of these more circuitous pathways?
So basically more of a, I guess, parallel sidewalk to the shared use path.
Taking it from here, for example, going straight.
The other suggestion that one of my colleagues made was that, like this, walk your bikes, make that whole area a walk your bike only area, so that they have to dismount as they're going through the park and getting over to Wisconsin, all the way to Wisconsin.
I think as a compromise too, I mean, the idea about, Andy or Kevin, do you know if there's any kind of markings that separate bikes on the Purple Line portion of this?
Yeah, there's no markings to separate bikes and peds on the Purple Line portion.
Yeah, because I think
And as I said, it's a completely different dynamic. You're not talking about pedestrians on the Capitol Crescent Trail in the numbers that you're going to be talking about in this park and at the new development. So you need to put a separate glass on when you're looking at this congested pedestrian area.
Yeah, understood. And I think that the idea of providing some pavement marking to delineate, where people are supposed to be is applicable here, and could be helpful as long as bicyclists are compliant with it. But I think too, something that we've considered, and I think something that we've seen just and it's always in my recollection that this portion of the trail has been proposed as a shared use path versus separation. And like Andy said, I'm not sure if that was just to be consistent with the trail coming in through Purple Line in front of the park. But I think just we see in practice, if there's a lot of pedestrian volume on a section of shared use path, then it kind of enforces a speed limit sort of for bikes, and people will tend to just kind of get used to that amount of volume. Bikes slow down, people might dismount. I understand, but I totally understand there being a safety concern about bikes whizzing by here, commuters, that kind of thing too. So I just wanted to give that kind of insight as someone who designs a lot of these things. And I think, here's different stories about how they work well and people kind of figure it out and they self-regulate, and also hearing bad stories about, a bike was whizzing by and somebody got hurt or injured or something like that. So just wanted to provide kind of both perspectives.
Armory, do you have a question?
I don't really have a question, just as I hear you talking, I thought your comment that pedestrian volume would impose sort of a natural speed limit. It made me think, really, children will be on this path and a lot of people just from the town going into Bethesda, and they won't have, necessarily intended to get on the bike path. So, I mean, I agree with the points raised by my colleagues that there needs to be more separation.
Thank you all for those comments. We are running out of time, but let me make a general one here. I think what would be valuable would be for the town with Parks and yourselves to come together for a meeting. I'm not entirely comfortable with the idea that you represent our views back to Parks. We know Parks very well. We're working with them very closely for the design of the Farm Women's Market project. We have spoken with EYA and Parks and with DOT about the safety concerns here. So we really do have a seat at the table and should not be receiving things without having a chance to comment. So my real request here would be that we organize a meeting that includes the town anytime in the next few weeks, so we can put on the table our concerns and see to what extent they can be addressed. I think one other aspect of this is that we do need to see the holistic plan, which includes the new playground, which we're very excited about. It's going to be a terrific playground that's going to replace the rather old and dilapidated one that's currently on the north side of Elm Street Park. And it's going to have three different, I'm saying this to the residents who are in our meeting here, it's going to have three different sections for three different age groups. It's going to take up a lot more space and be a very, really exciting playground. We also, to the point that my colleagues have made, we are very involved in the design and the work on the park and the Farm Women's Market. And we anticipate a very dramatic increase in the number of residents and people from all over Bethesda using that market, buying their lunch, buying snacks, then wanting to go to this playground. And we really want a very safe way for that to be undertaken. I can take it that Parks is offering this kind of stirrup looking thing to help accommodate that. And I can see how it could help. It should help. The question is whether it will really do the job or not. And part of that requires connecting the dots over to the north side. If you push the map over to explore the north side, right now the path, no, I'm sorry, that's direction. Right now you can see the path curves back to Elm Street. But the playground is directly across from where that circle is. It's below. So what we really need to see is a path that is direct, that everybody will appreciate, going all the way from the Farm Women's Market and the park right behind it to the playground, and then making sure that is properly marked and really focused on, and to help encourage people to use it. So I think and the other aspect of this is I take the point, Parks is concerned about losing trees. We understand that. We don't want to lose more canopy trees in Elm Street Park. So that's an important factor. But all I'm really saying here is I think this requires a sit-down review of all these factors to see how they can all be taken into account. And the last one I'll mention, which we've brought up before, is the prospect of a broad elevated crosswalk across Willow to carry the pedestrian traffic. If you go back to that intersection, it's obviously, it's one thing for the bicycles to go right off a ramp and onto the ramp and go onto the Capitol Crescent Trail. But we're also asked whether there could be an elevated broad sidewalk that would basically act both as a conduit for pedestrian traffic, but also as essentially a gargantuan speed hump that would slow down any traffic and make sure that cars going through that intersection stay at low speeds. So is that considered?
The main issue with that is it blocks the drainage flow.
I'm sorry, is the what?
It blocks the drainage that's going, I guess it'd be going east on Willow with that speed hump. So you basically recreating a pond situation. And there's a lot of
I'm sorry to interrupt because we're running out of time. We have speed humps in the town. We don't have them go into the gutters, or in any event, you could have pipes. No, I mean, I can't believe this isn't a solvable problem.
I think I I think when we were first doing the initial concept design for this, there was a race crossing as part of one of the initial concepts. And this was back in like, I think 2018 or 2019, even before I was project manager. I've just seen some of the previous correspondence about that. There was a hydraulic engineer, drainage engineer on the project at the time. And this concept was, there were still, the same stakeholders involved, MCDOT, parks, people from the town of Chevy Chase too. And the project manager from MCDOT at the time, I think, distributed several of these concepts. It was analyzed by the drainage engineer at the time, and the drainage engineer had made the conclusion that it would be really challenging to install. I think the only catch basin is at the north side of the park. And so it'd be really challenging to install an inlet there and tie into the existing system, challenging, expensive. And so I have an email that I could dig up and send to you that give justification for that decision making. And then I think the PM from MCDOT at the time went with
That would be helpful.
recommendation.
That would be helpful, but it wasn't that many months ago that I was speaking at a meeting that focused on traffic issues with the developers, with DOT and with parks. And I specifically, again, raised this as something we wanted to have looked at. And nobody at that time said that there had already been a previous study done that indicated why this was difficult. So anyway, I think there's been a failure there to basically make all this clear enough. But the fundamental point is we're asking for a meeting that will include us at the table so we can review this and do so as quickly as can be arranged. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading back on some old emails. It's definitely something we can bring up with Parks to try to schedule a meeting. And
Whom are you working with at Parks on this, by the way?
we were working with Linda Gomez, but then she retired, so then
she's
we've been
left,
working
yeah.
with Matthew Weir.
Yeah, Matt's a good guy. We like Matt a lot. He's fine. But there shouldn't be any problem having all of us sit down at the table.
Right. And then we
thank you.
can
Look, yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
so yeah, we can also, after the conclusion of this meeting, provide a point-by-point response with some of the suggestions that were offered up today as well.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. Look, we're pleased that you're making this progress. We're also pleased that the utilities, that the Pepco's decided to put the poles on the east side, I'm sorry, the west side of the street. That's great, actually. That takes care of what obviously had been a major impediment. So that will quite materially improve the safety for this project, which is good. So we're pleased about that. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it, and look forward to hearing more about, especially prospect of being able to have a meeting where we can talk further about the issues that we brought up tonight.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Calling this town council meeting to order. Thank you for coming. First, we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in. I thought I saw you come in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with justice for all. Yeah. Now you confused me. Okay, turn this over to our new treasurer for the May financial report. Please go ahead, Carla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for what will be a rather unremarkable first presentation for me as
That's the way we always like them from the treasurer.
No, as you can see from the materials, we are 11 months into our fiscal year. And at this point, we've expended 86% of the budgeted expenditures for the year, and we have brought in 86% of the revenue. So that's going quite well. We have one more month rather, of revenues to collect, and we expect to get to our proposed budget. And as you sort of look at for those of you, there's a summarized report and a detailed report for those who want to get into any of the details. I'll just make one note on the capital expenditure side in terms of, we show activity for the 11-month period and the budget for the entire year. And, things are tracking pretty closely in aggregate. I would say on the capital expenditure side, we will be coming in under what we had budgeted. Some capital expenditure activity that was planned for this fiscal year is being pushed out. So we had budgeted just under $1 million, and we've spent only about $450,000 to date. So even with next month's expenditures in that category, we should be well below what we had budgeted and finish the year well within our budget. So unless there are questions.
Are there any questions?
I had a very quick question, and it's might be so detailed that might have to be answered. The miscellaneous revenue came in like really high this month, and I don't know what that was attributable to.
Well, I will gladly turn this over to Todd, who I'm
Okay.
sure has, if you
That's a
need me to
very
filibuster a little bit, Todd, so you can get that detailed answer. No, Todd, do you
I
have
have
that?
it. I have it. Yeah, it's due to a rebate from our workers' comp insurance. We overpaid, so we got a rebate. It was to the tune of $13,000 or $14,000.
So that counts as revenue, even though we overpaid it. Okay, got it.
It does. We don't offset the workers'
That's
comp,
already, I guess.
but it's a wash. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, good. Town manager, your report, please.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll just review some of the staff functions and activities over the past month. We coordinated new council member orientation. Staff also joined some council members to meet with Delegate Solomon and SHA officials to discuss Bradley Lane safety. The takeaway from that meeting was the SHA committed to complete a study on improving safety along Bradley Lane within the next 90 days. Also, Delegate Solomon is facilitating a meeting with the Montgomery County Police Department and Councilmember Friedson to discuss speed camera installations on the north side of Bradley Lane. That should happen as of today. The notification was the 27th we'll be meeting with Delegate Solomon, Councilmember Friedson, and representatives of the Automated Traffic Enforcement Unit of the Montgomery County Police Department to discuss options and alternatives for speed cameras on the north side of Bradley. Staff also researched speed camera authority and implementation, and we continue to review potential improvements to Ridge Street and West Avenue, which will be discussed this evening. We also reviewed traffic and stormwater management issues on Rosemary Street, as well as possible crosswalk on Ridgewood Avenue. Staff also communicated with the Purple Line officials about a noise complaint and an overgrown vegetation complaint. And we received and distributed information from Purple Line or MTA officials about the horn and bell policy that the town had engaged in, has been engaged in for quite some time with respect to when the LRV, the light rail vehicle, will sound its horn when entering or leaving the Bethesda portal. And we received confirmation that the LRV, the light rail vehicle, will not sound its horn when entering or leaving the portal. However, if a maintenance worker is present in the portal, a wayside warning device operated remotely will activate audible and visual alerts to notify the worker of an approaching vehicle. And if the worker doesn't respond to these warnings, the LRV operator will then sound the horn. But we were pleased to receive confirmation from the MTA that, as we had received several years ago, that the horn will not sound automatically every time the LRV, the light rail vehicle, will enter or leave the portal. The staff also communicated with county officials about compliance with the state's ADU setback bill. Ron can provide some more information. The county really hasn't reacted to that bill yet to determine how it's going to modify its ordinances and regulations to comply with the new accessory dwelling unit setback bill. But we are waiting to determine how they're going to proceed and then potentially follow suit or determine our own way forward. If I'm not mistaken, the compliance, our regulations don't need to comply with the new state law until October of 2026. Is that right, Ron?
That's correct.
And so we have some time to discuss this. We might want to take a different path forward with respect to what our ADU setbacks require in order to comply with state law, but that is to be discussed by the council at a future meeting. The staff also developed a vegetative screening plan for the north end of Zimmerman Park. And as was communicated to the council, excuse me, this fall, we're going to plant some native holly trees along the new fence in Zimmerman Park to screen park users from east-west highway. When planted, the trees will be approximately, we're going to try to procure them so they're 8 to 10 feet tall when planted, and they'll eventually grow to a height of 20 to 30 feet with a spread of 15 to 20 feet. Obviously, the town annually will prune them to keep them off the new fence and manage the spread. And these plantings, which will be done in the fall, will complete the Zimmerman Park redevelopment project. Staff also assists with drafting proposed resolution for funding of the outdoor classroom project at Rosemary Hills Elementary School, and that'll be discussed later this evening. We continue to review LED streetlight conversion and tariff options. We also provided correspondence and a construction schedule update from Corso Chevy Chase to residents adjacent to the property at 7100 Connecticut Avenue. Just brief highlights that early this month, if not already, they've begun construction of the town's temporary garage. The demolition of the buildings will begin late this month, and their anticipated completion of demolition activities will be in early October of this year. Staff continue to manage overgrown vegetation, working through the town to encourage residents to prune private plantings off of the sidewalks and using our contractor to assist when residents can't or won't comply. We completed the spring tree plantings. 139 public and private trees were planted. I think 90 of those were private trees, a significant increase in our normal private tree planting count, which explains why we're over budget in that line item as well. And we also provided project to support to town committees. And that concludes the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from my colleagues? Thank you, Todd. Thank you for explaining the nature of the screening that's going to go into Zimmerman Park. I think the fact that we could end up with trees that are 20 to 30 feet high there is terrific, because one of the things that people had always wanted was better screening and a sense of being able to be distanced from east-west highway. For a long time, with all the work we were doing to get permission from the various authorities, at least I, for one, had thought that we were going to be limited to very short vegetation. So the fact that we can put in something that will grow to be 20 to 30 feet is very substantial. So that's great. That's good to hear. Thank you. Okay, time for public comments. Deborah, please.
Excuse me. I'm Deborah Vollmer, and I live at 7202 44th Street. In the house that I have lit, well, it's my home that I literally lived in during my childhood. It's my childhood home, and I live in California, but I moved back, and the town of Chevy Chase is my home. I want to talk about an issue that some are going to think is trivial, the town neighbors listserv. I've addressed the town council before about this, and there's been a lot of email exchange, so I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much. But on the one hand, this is maybe seen as a trivial issue. On another hand, when you look at it from the perspective of the town with our humble town government and our community of town residents, we're talking about community. So it really is important. It's not trivial. And while this is about me, it's not just about me. As I've mentioned before the council, I am the only Town Neighbors listserv member who has been banned from posting messages. And I won't go into detail about how this happened, except to say it was a disagreement over a post about a common problem we had in town, misdelivery of mail within our town. And I had a new incident to report, and the moderator refused to post the message. She said it was repetitive. It was not repetitive. It was a new incident. We tried to iron this out through email, which is not the best way of resolving a dispute, but we haven't, well, it hasn't, my efforts to try to get a meeting with the moderator have not met with any success. Now, why is this of concern to the town? Our town government, I contend, endorses the listserv, Town Neighbors. Every time a link appears on the town website or the town crier in its weekly updates, that is an endorsement. I don't see any way around that. Of course, it's an endorsement. And I would note that as a town resident, my tax dollars, admittedly in a very tiny amount, help to keep the town government going. So the analogy is clear. A nonprofit organization that serves public purposes and receives public funding should have some level of accountability with respect to how its members are treated. And in this case, there are no public funds involved. Town Neighbors is not supported financially by the town government. However, there is this endorsement. I see no way around this. It's an endorsement. And I do not consent to having my very small amount of tax dollars from me to the town to go to endorsing a listserv that's not fair to its members. Today, I wanted to post about the bead lady, and those of you who received a plethora of emails about this subject will know what I'm talking about. A friend of mine, I have no financial interest in this, sells beads at the Farm Women's Market, in front of the Farm Women's Market, but she lives in Florida and she only comes through every now and then. And she happens to be in town. There are a few times I've wanted to post, and since I couldn't post on Town Neighbors, what could I do? Not everybody's interested in beads and people who sell beads, strands of beads, individual beads, making jewelry, but some people are interested. I normally would post on Town Neighbors, and people who don't care about the bead lady could simply note that I'd posted about this and gone on about their lives and ignored it and not done anything. But those who would like to know, they would know about this. Today I noted there was actually a post about someone, by the way, I can receive messages, but I can't post. This is the problem. I know what people are talking about, but I can't respond. So somebody posted today about a problem with misdelivery of mail, which is exactly the issue that led us to the controversy. And I'm saying, that should have been posted. It was a case, I think they were expecting something from the DMV and they didn't get, well, very serious issue. And that should have been posted. So should my post about when I had a problem about misdelivery of mail after dark and mail being scattered on my front porch, which was not posted. I've tried to meet with the moderator. I've suggested that email is not the best way to resolve disputes. It's a good way of sharing information, but not necessarily resolving disputes. I've suggested that we meet over coffee or hot chocolate or tea or whatever at a local restaurant or somebody's house, or that we meet in the park and go for a walk, but just talk, as one adult human being to another. And at this point, when I send an email, if I send an email to a group, then the moderator seems to respond and get involved. If I send it to her individually, because I'm trying to de-escalate this, but if I send it to her individually, I get no response whatsoever. And this is childish behavior and it's bullying behavior. And at this point, Town Neighbors serves at multiple public purposes. Where do you go if you spot somebody's missing pet? Town Neighbors. What do you do if you find a valuable piece of jewelry or some other valuable something on the sidewalk near your house? You post on Town Neighbors. What do you do if there's a fallen tree or another hazard, traffic hazard on the street in front of your house? You post on Town Neighbors. I cannot do that. It stifles my voice, but it also deprives other people in the community of information that I might have that might be of help to them. So I only wish to have my posting status restored, but not to have any special conditions imposed on me, because that would be a recipe for, I think, further bullying behavior. And I'm saying bullying, and I'm saying, I use terms like gaslighting, and that's real. But I also acknowledge that Wicca Davidson, the moderator, has worked very hard in keeping the listserv going, and that it is for her a labor of love. And I acknowledge that. And why, if I acknowledge that, will she not meet with me so that one-on-one, as adults, we can talk this out and reach an accommodation? All I'm asking is to have my posting status restored with no conditions that are not imposed on other listserv members. And we seem to be at an impasse. But again, I raise this issue that the town does endorse the listserv. And even when we have town council elections, a lot of the information comes out through Town Neighbors. Some of it comes out directly from the town, but a lot of it from Town Neighbors. So, there are all these public purposes that the listserv serves. And unless and until I have my posting status fully restored with no conditions imposed upon me that other listserv members don't have to endure. Unless that happens, and until that happens, I ask that the town withdraw its support of Town Neighbors and stop posting the link, take the link off the website and stop putting it on the as a link on the town crier weekly updates. So that's my statement. A little long, and I know I've addressed this issue before. And again, this is may seem trivial to many people, but I feel that when you look at in terms of the town and the sense of community, it's not at all trivial. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Anybody else who'd like to stand up and speak at this time? Deaton? Deaton, could you please go to the podium and provide your name and address?
Deaton Ingram at 4312 Willow Lane. I have a comment about the contribution to the child care center for the playground. I wasn't sure if this was the time to make it or if there would be time when you discuss that topic.
Wonders? For Wonders you're talking
Wonders.
about, or for Rosemary Hills?
For Wonders.
Yes, you should make that now.
Okay. My comment is that, and this may already be part of the plan, is I would favor the contribution provided that there's a requirement that town residents or others are allowed to use the playground after the hours close for the daycare center. That was always the case many, many years ago when the All Saints All Day was there. Town residents could use that playground starting at 6 in the evening when the daycare closed, and it could use it on the weekends. And it was a really nice little playground because it's walled in, so your kids couldn't go running helter-skelter in all directions. And it was equipment for smaller children. And there was a little play in a sandbox, so it was very attractive to kids. So I would just suggest that if that's not currently part of the plan, that would be a really nice thing to reinstate.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? here in the room? Okay. Anybody on the video who wishes to make a comment during this period of time? Well, that's probably a fair point. Maybe I should, if they're just so that make sure the process here is clear. We do have we permit comments from residents pertaining to a particular topic at the time we talk about that topic, if it is a public hearing, which we are going to have one of very shortly, dealing with a potential contribution to Rosemary Hills for an outdoor classroom. If people are here, the other issues that we know people are keenly interested in, both dealing with Ridge Street and also dealing with the boundaries issue. Those are discussion items that we're going to have later on. And those discussions will only be among the council members at that time. So if you wish to speak to either of those two topics, now is your time to speak. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
There's the discussion page. There's 4 topics.
Yes, for any of the discussion topics. Yes, that's right. Yes, please. Thanks, Rich. I appreciate that.
Well, my name is Helen Price. I live at 4419 Ridge Street, and I'm probably the next house over from where the proposed changes are being made or have been proposed to be made on Ridge Street. And I have 3 dogs that I walk. And so I am going through the part of Ridge Street that doesn't have sidewalks probably, 6 or 7 times a day, including going to Trader Joe's, going to pick up sushi, whatever. I'm there in the road quite a bit, so it's important to me. And I haven't really talked to anybody from the town. I've only heard things from my neighbors. So I'm really hoping that you'll, before you make any decisions about go or no go or whatever, that you'll have a listening session with some of the neighbors. I personally am wary of narrowing the road there. I don't really trust people to not hit the sidewalk if they're expecting the road to be wider. That intersection is busy. There are cars turning and people there that aren't part of the local community because of the church and what have you. I've always been told that the reason why we weren't allowed to park there on the one side of the street is because emergency vehicles need a certain width to turn to get into our street. And so that is a concern for me. I really think this is a great opportunity to have a sidewalk where the new construction is. I would really like for you to move forward with that. I am, and then there are the 2 houses that are between the new construction and the rest of where the sidewalk starts. And one of those 2 houses has a really large tree in the front yard. And so I kind of understand why they want to bump out the sidewalk, because we've lost a lot of large trees on our street, and I would really like to be able to preserve it. And I'm concerned that cutting into its roots, and it's like higher up than the rest of it's higher up than the road. So I'm sure its roots are like where you would put a sidewalk. And so I would urge you to think about whether, I know that there are bridges over roots in other parts of the town. I would urge you to either consider that as a possibility or consider maybe putting a sidewalk where the new construction is, where everything's up for grabs right now, and holding off and maybe having a little area that isn't contiguous, because eventually there will be other things that happen. Hopefully those houses will still be there for a few decades, but we all know that once something changes hands in the town, it tends to be torn down and things change. So I think we have an opportunity right now to deal with the sidewalk issue where the new construction is. And but I don't want you to do the bump out. And I've heard some other people who are concerned about that. And I would like you to rethink what you can do with those other two houses, whether it's deferring a decision or having some sort of bridge that you're not taking out another tree. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Appreciate your comment. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment at this time? Sure.
Thank you, Council. My name is Nick Jetty. I'm also a Ridge Street resident. I have two very kind of brief comments. One relates to the Montgomery County public school boundary issue that's come up right now. For those not aware, there are currently 4 different options that would be changing the middle school and high school boundaries, all of which will impact town residents. And I think at this point, since they seem to be in a fact-finding mode, it would be, I think, very important for anyone who's interested to educate themselves and also anyone who wants to voice their opinion to complete the survey that the county has been putting around. I don't have that information handy, but would think it would be great if we could get that out to folks if possible.
We actually have provided that.
Oh, it is in the, that was in the.
No,
Great.
we in the town crier about, I guess now 2 weeks ago now,
Okay.
we did send out that notice and pointed people to the questionnaire for them to fill out.
Perfect.
But you
Then
made a
just-
good point. It's always good to rerun a commercial. So we're happy to send that out again, Todd, if you want to take note of that.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And then just my other comment relates to the sidewalk proposals for Ridge and West. We've mainly discussed this with our fellow neighbors on Ridge Street. I would just echo everything that Helen said. There's a lot of concern amongst the neighbors about any narrowing of the street. And there does not seem to be any consensus over which of the options would be preferred. And I would just urge the town council to please try to incorporate a lot of the locals who live on that street, their comments and thoughts before moving forward. It's a very impactful issue for all of us, and we'd appreciate the ability to kind of put our voices out there. So thank you.
Sure. No, thank you, Nick. Okay, is there anybody else? Dean, you wish to speak again? Go ahead.
Dean Ingram, 4312 Willow Lane. Would like to support extending that sidewalk on Ridge. I mean, there's 2 new houses or 2 houses at the corner there. Would be easy to put a sidewalk in there now. And then I would hate to see that big tree come down. But if there's any way to sort of sneak the sidewalk around it with a bridge or however, that would be great. I don't live on Ridge, but I walk on Ridge pretty much every day. And it would really be nice not to have to hop out into the street. I have to say the cars coming around the corner towards you from west don't seem to care if there's a pedestrian in their way. They expect you to hop out of the way. So it would be nice to have a sidewalk and not have to be there.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening. Thanks for a chance to talk to you all. Dave Metzger, 4421 Ridge Street. Just want to say I echo Nick and Helen's comments about the sidewalk. I'm all for sidewalk safety. I have a special needs daughter that walks on that area. So I'm 5 houses. I'm the 5th house from the corner. So I certainly get that. But I would ask you all respectfully to consider the neighbors that live there, not just everybody that walks on the street, and our feelings there. And I think you'll find, especially we have a public hearing, that there's probably, while people may endorse a sidewalk to an extent, nobody wants it to be bumped, the curbs to be bumped out and the road to be narrowed. So appreciate all the work that Dave and the other engineers have done, given some options. I would certainly hope that they could come up with an option that would keep the houses, I'm 4421, 23 and 25, the two houses before the new construction. New construction, those people get what they get because they're moving and they're not there. But the people there, if we could find a solution that helps the people, it doesn't impact my property a little bit because the sidewalk runs in front of my house, but it starts to curve out. So I'm not as concerned. But 4423 and 4425, if there's something we can do to make their property, or I know there's a right of way there, but can help make them satisfied and put a sidewalk in that doesn't bump it out, I think people would be happy. But I think you'll find a general consensus on that street, which Nick indicated and Helen indicated, we would not necessarily be in favor of. And if you can do something to protect the trees, absolutely, because that tree cover is very, very important. So I think you're going to have a public hearing at some point and other people will come, but appreciate the opportunity to put my 2 cents in. So thank you very much.
We're glad to have it. That's one of the main purposes of public comments, is to gain those additional perspectives and wisdom. Anybody else wishing to speak here? Anybody else on the boundary issue? We thought there might be some people wishing to speak on that. Okay. Anybody who's currently on video wishes to speak?
Well,
right.
this is Marie Webster from the 4425. I just wanted to reiterate that it seems.
I'm sorry, could you please, I didn't catch you. Could you also please show yourself?
Oh, sorry. Where is that? There. Yeah. Yes, so I'm at 4425 and I, have looked at the plans and I don't think any of them are satisfactory, because if you go for the option 2, that tree will have to come down. And if you go for option 3, the street will be narrower. So you will have to come up with a 4th option, I think, if you don't want to take out the tree. And I think, like I had 6 healthy trees beside me removed in the last 8 months since that construction. And I think it would be terrible, terrible shame to bring down yet another one. Maybe Helen's solution is a good one, but hopefully we'll have plenty of discussion after your meeting tonight to clarify things. So that's all. I just wanted to reiterate.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that comment. Good to meet you too. Anybody else? Okay. That's the end of public comments. We will now turn to a public hearing on the prospect that the town will help support the construction of an outdoor classroom at Rosemary Hill Elementary School. And in your packet is a draft resolution. For the audience, this is basically a proposal that the town contribute $10,000 outright and potentially another $10,000 if matched by other parties so potentially our contribution could be $20,000 to support a construction of an outdoor classroom at Rosemary Hills. Obviously, we have kids in our town who go to Rosemary Hills, so this would benefit them. This proposal came to us from Kathy Vale in Section 3. They are putting in $13,000 for this. And they are actually looking for other municipalities to help out. So this potentially could be our contribution. So with that as a preamble, let me ask if there's anybody who wishes to speak to this issue. Please, Deborah.
Deborah Vollmer, 7202 44th Street. I won't go on at length because I think I've spoken to this council at least twice before, maybe just twice before, actually in support of this proposal. I think the idea of having an outdoor classroom where kids can both learn while appreciating being in an environment surrounded by nature and trees and birds and squirrels, whatever, that it's a wonderful idea. And we do need to support our children. So I support the proposal.
Okay. Thank you, Deborah. Does anybody else wish to speak? Please.
Hi, I'm Katie Vale from the Rosemary Hills PTA in Section 3. Just wanted to say thank you again for your consideration of this. I also wanted to update you and let you know I was at the Section 5 meeting last night, and they agreed to a contingent amount of $10,000 contingent upon approval. So we're chugging along there, still working on some
Very
other
good
things,
news.
but just thought I'd share that as
That's
you
terrific news.
consider this. But thank you again for all your support and ideas, and happy to answer any questions that people have.
So thus far, it's $23,000 that you've.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Thank you.
That's real progress. Thank you very much. Okay, no one else to speak. I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to my colleagues for discussion of the resolution. Are there any comments?
I'm in full support of this. I really appreciated the way the resolution was stated. There's, more than a year to secure the funding, that we'd be able to see the final plans, make sure the budget is updated accordingly. My only kind of overall question, because it does say that the match dollar for dollar is non-governmental funding sources. So at some point, whose responsibility amongst us, and maybe as community liaison, community relations liaison, it might be me, but to make sure that our residents are well aware of the opportunity to contribute personal funds towards this so that we can get to that $10,000 amount.
That's actually a very good point. And Katie, we ought to have a discussion about that, because the whole purpose of the matching is to indeed induce people, and primarily residents, not just of the town, but also the other Chevy Chases, to take advantage of that and realize that their contribution will effectively be doubled by further contribution from the town. So yes, we should certainly take that up.
Well, I did want to comment on that. As we talked the last time about the PTA actually addressing directly the kids that live in the town, their parents, with something that tells them, hey, if you contribute, the town will contribute as well. So that avenue of getting to the parents of the students who live in the town would be very useful for us as well.
We would welcome that opportunity to work with you and be the sort of the leader on liaising directly, and really appreciate anything you can do to get the word out. But we would, go full force on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Irene, did I hear you volunteer to?
Yeah, I just assumed that it would be me. So should this
Yes.
pass, we would be in touch directly,
Good.
to make sure that our right hand and the left hand know what's going on. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Just agree with my colleagues. I fully support this. I think it's a great opportunity for us to support the school.
Good, all right,
And I too agree.
okay. Well, then, is there a motion?
I move to, let me make sure I'm stating it correctly here, that the town will provide $10,000 towards the Rosemary Hill outdoor classroom project, with an additional $10,000 subject to that being matched by non-governmental funding sources.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just for the audience's awareness, there are conditions, just to make this clear, because it is not out the door yet. The conditions are that we will review and approve that the town will have the authority to review and approve the final plans. And part of what's behind that is we don't know exactly what the final budget will be. And as Katie has explained previously, that if they're somewhat short of the funds, they might cut back the project. That could be fine, but we'd obviously want to look at that before we released our money. That they have to get approval from the Montgomery County Public School District, obviously, for the plans, and that there are binding commitments from everybody else for their proportional shares, so that we know that we're putting all of our money in together, and that it all be secured by September of 2026. We just need to have some deadline. So those are the conditions to the grant. Okay, great, terrific. Thank you very much. Good. Moving on to council discussions. First, there's a request for some additional support to Wonders. Please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Hurt. I'm the Executive Director of Wonders Early Learning and Extended Day. And last year, we were very appreciative of a grant that we received from the town that helped us to spruce up our classrooms. And we had a ribbon cutting with Irene, which was really fun, after everything got all fixed up. I just want to tell you briefly. So Wonders occupies the space at the end of this complex. It is property owned by, or managed, I should say, by the Department of Health and Human Services. We are the tenants. We're part of something that's called childcare in public spaces. And it's a program that the county offers to try to ensure that there are some lower, some spaces in the county that have lower than retail value rents. We're a nonprofit. We've been around since 1976. Next year, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. And we have been the only childcare provider in that facility. In fact, my two children were at Leland many years ago. And so we've been it's been at least 35 years that we've been in this space. I don't remember the exact date. So what because we are a nonprofit, we invest back into our program, and that our biggest investment is our teachers, because we really believe that high quality early care and education is directly connected to a caring, well-prepared, and well-compensated workforce. This field does not compensate the educators as it should, and because of the broken system of early care and education in our country, it's up to individual programs and then individual families to be making it all work economically. So having donated dollars and certainly public support helps to make everything work. So this year, what we'd really like to do is have some shade in the back playground. That's our property, or that's part of the leased space, and that's the only space that our children are allowed to play on when they're in our care. We are accredited by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which only 6% of the early care and education programs in the country are. And it's very specific. They have a lot of health and safety rules, as well as other program quality measures. And so we need to be in a fenced area. And so we need some shade, in particular over the sandbox. And then we also need a really more permanent solution to the covering of the sandbox, because some of you who may have had sandboxes in your own backyards at some time, some neighborhood critters like to use sandboxes, and that does not, it's not healthy for kids. So we have a contractor who has worked with the county before and is approved to work with the county. So he came out, and they're going to be able to construct a cover that will be easy for our teachers to be able to remove and place on every day, but also shade so that the kids will have some shade and just as a little side note, the outdoor playground or classroom is great at Rosemary Hills. I think the more appreciation for nature that we're teaching our children will be really beneficial, because the heat in the summer really has changed the way we're able to plan our days, because there are days when we can't go outside, or at least not as long as we used to. And so we have to come up with some new solutions as a community. So more shade and cover, and then we need the wood chips constantly need to be replaced. And that's also, we need 12 inches of wood chips for safety. And so those are our main projects to get the back playground to be more suitable for where, what we'd like to do with the children. And then we also had a request for some furniture for the teacher's lounge. I have to say that we had the governor came and visited our program earlier this year, and he and the county executive are going to speak privately after the visit, and they wanted to use the teachers' lounge. And I was like, oh gosh. I was like, it has a lot of boxes and like old chairs, and they were like, it's okay, it won't be a long meeting. So but it did also, I was like, if it's not good enough for the governor, it's probably not good enough for our teachers. So so that made me, you know, think that that would be a really nice thing to be able to add to our wish list. So any questions?
I guess help us understand more about the budget that you're talking about here that is involved in, because there are three different proposals, right?
It's actually two. It's just that, so it's the playground,
Okay.
and we have some, there's blacktop on the playground.
Okay, that's not on discussion.
That's
So
on
the total
hold.
of these two is around $6,000 or so.
Yes.
Something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're waiting on the blacktop stuff for a more permanent solution.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues? I have one other, considering the comment that was made by the resident just a few minutes ago. Could the playground be available for the town after Wonders is?
I have to check on that with DHHS and my team who, you know, lead that program there because of the lease and everything. So I will find out.
Okay.
Okay, because in the past, so just to let you know, we have one of the things our teachers do in the morning when they're setting up is they at all of our programs, they do a sweep of the outdoor space to make sure there's no safety concerns. When playgrounds are available, it's of course we like to share with the community, but sometimes there's things that we find that have been used after dark, that it provides like more cleanup time and mass.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I just wondered where we are in the process for this. This is a discussion.
Yeah,
What
so
happens
what
next?
we'd have to decide is if we wish to hold a public hearing, because to make this as a supplemental appropriation to the budget requires a public hearing. So the question for tonight is, are we generally enough in support or consensus to go forward that we'd like to hold a public hearing on this matter, which we would presumably do in July?
Oh, so the one comment I have is I do appreciate the explanation of the proposal, but in comparison to the Rosemary Hills description, we don't have a lot of detail. And if neighbors are reviewing this, they won't really understand, the background and the justifications. So I think it might be good to have more detail, a better description of the rationale and what the money would be spent on.
I think that's a good comment, completely fair. So you could prepare that, John, for us quickly, right? Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to understand whether, at first when I heard the suggestion to have, resident children, say, post closing of Wonders, but then until dusk, be able to play, I was a little nervous about that because I know that it's like a closed off space, and how do you ensure that it's going to be kept in a sufficient way so that the next morning the teachers are able to quickly set up for their day. So I'd like to have some clarity about that, just so that we're all transparent about the expectations for it. So, but in general, I'm in support of moving forward with a public hearing on it.
Fair to say that's a consensus? But I think take on board, we do need to see this material. So if you can get that to us within a week, because I don't really want to schedule the public hearing formally until we have that material. I think it's important that we have it. We do need a full explanation, and we should do so before we have the public hearing. And also, if you can run to ground the issue of whether residents could use the facility, that'd be great. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the second discussion item, which is the discussion and possible approval of a memorandum of understanding of the use of town right-of-way for the Capitol Crescent Surface Trail Phase 2 project. We had a work session for 45 minutes before this council meeting where we met with a member of the Montgomery County Department of Transportation and two of the consultants who have done the design work for this being the stretch of the Capitol Crescent Trail that runs along 47th Street and the west side of Elm Street Park. Staff has worked on an MOU regarding this. Todd, do you want to speak to this at all? Because you're the one who's been the key negotiator on this proposed.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Absolutely, thanks. And Ron can back me up here a little bit. But we have been in negotiations back and forth with MCDOT, Montgomery County Transportation, regarding this memorandum of understanding related to the use of town right-of-way for the Capitol Crescent Surface Trail that you heard about at the work session prior to the regular meeting. Multiple iterations of the MOU have gone back and forth between MCDOT and the town. Initially, we were trying to parse out components of the project that will be maintained by the town and those that would be maintained by the county after construction of the improvements. I was sort of the mindset that whatever the county builds, the county maintains. And we structured the MOU in that way. So if you look at the responsibilities of the parties on page 2, you'll see that the county has the responsibility to design and construct the project, to reinforce a loading area of pavement, to construct the project in accordance with the plans, resurface and apply pavement markings to all impacted areas. There are notice requirements, modification not modifying the plans after initial completion without the prior consent of the town, providing construction oversight and inspection, installing and maintaining signage and traffic control. And the responsibilities of the town are simply 2, that we will provide timely review and comment of the project plans and specifications and schedules, and that we will, following initial construction, be responsible for maintaining only the asphalt street surfaces on 47th and Willow, excluding pavement markings related to the project. We will also be responsible for leaf and snow removal from street surfaces and sidewalks, excluding the Capitol Crescent Surface Trail within the corporate boundaries of the town. This is consistent with what we do, obviously, on other town rights-of-way streets. We maintain them, the asphalt street surfaces, concrete sidewalks, as well as provide snow and leaf removal. But it was made very clear in this MOU that the town wanted to establish that the county, if we provided the right of the county to use the right of way for this purpose, that whatever improvements the county makes will be maintained by the county, save for those I've just outlined. So it's a pretty straightforward MOU. Like I said, it went through multiple iterations, but it came down to a pretty straightforward MOU. It also addresses right of entry, duration and termination, insurance requirements, general terms. And I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have after reviewing this MOU. The one qualification, I would suggest that if the council wants to provide preliminary approval of this MOU, that it be conditioned on, or ultimately the execution of this MOU, that it be conditioned on presentation of final plans in substantial accordance with the town's wishes, and that it be addended to the MOU, the final MOU. And we may want to wait until this meeting occurs between MCODT and Montgomery Parks to determine whether or not the pathway will be structured or separated from pedestrian and bicyclists, but really not germane necessarily to the MOU about that. It's just establishing responsibilities for ongoing maintenance, initial construction and ongoing maintenance. And so if the council wants to give preliminary approval for me to execute this MOU at such time as final plans are presented and approved by the town, then I would suggest that might be the best way forward.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Before I open it up to my colleagues for questions, one clarifying question I have. This is called an MOU. When I worked on deals, an MOU was literally that, and basically a predicate before you would finalize terms of an agreement. And then the agreement is what really was binding and mattered. How might I consider the term memorandum of understanding here, or effectively, is this the agreement?
This is the agreement.
Effectively, this would be the agreement. The county has in the past proposed something more formalistic, which would actually convey title, which we've refused. And the county has in the past, as a matter of custom, negotiated contracts and referred to them as MOUs. So we've actually followed the county template in this proposal.
Okay, okay, but this does not, the use of the term MOU does not mean that this is any less authoritative than an agreement.
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted that clarification. Open it up to my colleagues. Rich?
Yeah, I'm Todd. You raised an important issue, which is I was very disappointed that with the plans that they showed us that didn't listen to us about the separation of pedestrians and bicyclists. And it seems to me that if we sign this MOU, we lose all leverage in that discussion at this moment. So, and because all we're doing is we're supposed to provide timely review and comment on the project plans. There's nothing in here that says we have to essentially approve those plans. And I don't want to lose leverage with them in our discussions until we've had the meeting and we see whether they're going to accommodate our concerns about that pedestrian bicycle interface and some of the other issues that were raised. So how would we, I mean, I understand your point that this is really about what the responsibilities are for maintaining the stuff that once it's built, but I want to have some leverage on them in the development of those plans.
Sure. I would suggest then the council give or provide at least some initial feedback tonight about the terms of the MOU ultimately when it's executed, but that it not necessarily approve necessarily the execution of it tonight. We would need to wait. It's more important to put it in front of you to determine whether or not you're okay with the provisions of this with respect to construction and maintenance. Ultimately, the final plans will be addended to this MOU. And if we want to wait to determine how we execute it and when we execute it, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't ask for the council's approval necessarily of my executing this agreement right now, but more of the approval of the provisions of the MOU once final plans are submitted and approved by the town.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Rich. Am I to understand that, and forgive me, Todd, if I misunderstood a previous conversation, that this MOU would cover phase 2 and phase 3?
That is correct. Yes, it's to cover phase 2 and phase 3, right?
So to Rich's point, because phase 3, as what was explained earlier today, was the path that will exit, if you will, from the ramp, the purple line area going through Elm Street Park, and then connecting into this phase 2 portion of the project. Because we have no idea about what's happening with that, to your point, Rich, or, about like the leverage of things, we're kind of going in a little bit blind, not knowing what the rest of this holistic plan and I think, Barney, you brought this up, let's understand holistically how this fits. So is it, Ron and Todd, you still think it's a good idea to have this MOU be for phase 2 and phase 3?
So I'm sorry. Let me amend my response. This memorandum really covers phase 2. It doesn't cover phase 3, but it covers phase 2.1 and 2.2, meaning the plans that will be submitted will cover the alignment and project along 47th and ultimately that portion along Willow Lane. But it doesn't cover phase 3, which is the connection between the northern end of Elm Street and the what do you want to
The
call it?
ramp.
Connection to the right, exactly.
And so that will be a different MOU?
Assumedly, it would be, but if I'm not mistaken, it wouldn't be an MOU with the town. It would, because that is not our right of way.
Phase 3 is entirely on Parks land.
True. It's just connecting into, okay. That's
That
what I
would
was.
be our right of way.
It's all
So
connecting.
it would only be the portions of the project along 47th and Willow within our right of way. The connection between the northern end of Elm Street Park and the ramp is outside of town right of way.
Okay.
Okay.
And is the
But yeah, there would not be a subsequent agreement as contemplated by this. And so if we wanted to try and assert some sort of leverage over phase 3, I think it should be done here.
I don't think we have such authority.
No,
only the connecting point?
only the leverage and there's an interest in global
Right. I guess
holistic approach.
exactly. Yeah, I understand.
Is the cure timeline of 90 days pretty standard? Because nothing gets done with the county, especially if there's a breach, 90-day resolution. So I'm just wondering, is that a standard timeline?
Are you talking about the notice and cure provision?
Yeah.
The duration and termination, part 4, subpart B. Anyone that has the material, either party material breach, you have 90 days to cure.
Well, that's to our advantage. If the county can't act in 90 days, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, material breach it's a pretty substantial
Right,
thing.
that
I'm not entirely sure we would, even if termination would help us. So I'm just wondering, the 90 days, is everyone comfortable with that?
I would say stick with 90, but as a matter of practice, if it needs to be 100, 110, what have you, a court is going to say you can wait the few extra weeks.
Right.
I see. Okay. Thank
It's
you.
a good question. Deborah?
So I do have a question also about this same section. It's effective upon the signature by all the parties, and it's perpetually renewable at the county's option. I was curious as to why it's only the county's option. And I just was also curious what the thinking behind subpart B was. Is there no other anticipated reason either party might terminate the agreement? Because as Irene said, material breach is a pretty significant event.
Certainly, the county does not want these improvements to be easily removed. Obviously, spending these funds to construct this connection, given the fact that the tunnel is not going to be constructed under Wisconsin. So there's a pretty tight test there for that material breach. Ron, I'll let you speak to the first question.
Sure. So would there be other circumstances where we might want to terminate? That could be if the trail is no longer necessary and we would want the roads to revert back to their prior framework and usage. But that seems pretty unlikely. This has been going on for so many years now. It's hard to remember all the negotiations, but I think we actually had something in there to that effect. But fell out through negotiations. But I'm going to look at the prior versions. But my recollection, if correct, is that we didn't think that was a serious enough issue to fall on our sword on, because revocation seems very unlikely under that circumstance. And I can't think of another situation where the agreement may be terminated, non-use or breach.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments?
Can I just?
Oh, sure. Carla.
Yeah. I'm generally okay with the provisions. I do agree with my colleagues that maintaining leverage over getting the town's concerns addressed is important. To that end, maybe it's a little, well, maybe specifically on this topic, we heard in the earlier this evening an intended schedule of construction starting this fall and being completed next spring, if I'm recollecting correctly. And I think from a prior meeting, the Capitol Crescent Trail, the Purple Line, might be made available next year sometime.
Spring of 2026.
Okay,
right.
so these could be coincident.
Yes,
And
that's actually what's driving their construction schedule. They would like to have it.
and the work in the park and north of Elm Street is being done by the Purple Line.
No, that work will be done by the Parks Department.
Montgomery
Remember
Parks.
about the playground?
Yeah, well, particularly, especially the path, I guess where I'm trying to get to is, are we going to build this thing before we're sure it's going to connect? We're going to be sitting with removing a sidewalk and having this trail and then not connecting to the rest of the project until whenever Parks gets around to doing their playground.
No, the playground is, as I understand it, the playground is separate from the work associated with that, what I'll call phase 3 of the Capitol Crescent Trail. In other words, connecting from the junction of 47th and Elm with a slightly sinuous curve that gets to the portal. That phase 3 can be built on its own. It's not required. It's not, the building the playground is not a predicate. They've set out the plan so that the playground will be on basically, I'll call it the south side of that trail. So the trail curves around closer to the portal and then goes into the portal. Playground's on the side of it. They may want to do a lot of it at the same time, but they aren't inherently linked. In any event, I think your point is probably accurate that there may be slippage of a few months here. Let's start with the fact that Pepco has to move its telephone poles. We know how long that can take. So but I think at the end of the day, we shouldn't be surprised if there's a mismatch in timing of some months as these different phases are being worked on.
Okay. And then maybe finally, and I maybe could look this up myself, but what right of way is the towns and what is the parks? Because I'm not sure. The sidewalk right now that exists, is that in our right of way or is that's a park? The park controls that.
Todd, and is it park owned? It's in our jurisdiction. Parks
It's in our
owns land, but the right of way is how deep?
I'm not sure I could tell you exactly from the curb line. I can tell you it's our charter indicates that our right of way is measured from the center line of the road. I believe it's 50 or 60 feet, but I can't give you an artificial marker. I don't, Dave, can you? I don't.
The sidewalk is currently in the town right of way, and our corporate boundary is the west side of 47. So the sidewalk in the Papa John's is also the sidewalk on that list.
It's also our towns, yeah. Yeah. We have the whole street.
So, and this is to what we were talking about earlier. Is it possible that a relocated sidewalk would still be in our right of way? And would that give us more leverage over parks to accommodate that if we thought that was?
The shared use trail sort of accommodates the entire width of the right of way.
It does.
Okay.
We would be in the parks.
Got it. Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Relocated, that new sidewalk that they're proposing would be on parkland, not in the town right away? Didn't look like that on the map.
Shared
No,
use.
I think what he was saying was that the Capitol Crescent Trail will use up the remaining amount of right of way that the town has.
Right, so the whole Capitol Crescent Trail
Is in
will
our
be
right of
in
way.
the town right of way,
Right. Okay.
which further reinforces our leverage.
Okay.
But any additional sidewalk, which is because we were asking for separation, then you're in parkland at that point. That's what.
Okay. All right. Pulling together everyone's comments, I think generally I would say, good job. You guys have gotten a lot, for them to do a lot and for us to be responsible for relatively little. So I think that to my mind is a very successful negotiation. And the 90-day point, I think it's vastly more likely that the county will be in breach. I think the most likely problem I can see is that they won't be able to keep up the concrete pad, and it's going to have to be repaired, and we're going to have to be after them for that. I think the chances of our failing to keep the road clear is from snow and ice is pretty low. But I think, let me see if I can summarize this properly to convey this, which is that we tonight approve the terms of this agreement, but are not giving authority to have it executed tonight, pending further discussion regarding issues that we've raised earlier this evening on pedestrian safety and walkability through the park. Does that capture it?
Not somewhat.
Okay, what else would you add?
Well, no, I'm under the section, is it 2B, responsibilities of the town. And it says provide timely review and comment of the project plans. I think we should be able to approve those plans. So I would have modified the terms I don't know whether that would cause them to not sign this, but I mean, right now they're gonna submit them to us. We're gonna provide comments within 30 days. And if we don't like them, we're too bad.
Todd, do you have any comment on that?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, that provision of the MOU just indicates that we need to provide timely review. The approval comes with the execution of the MOU. And so I don't believe it's necessary to say that we need to approve them necessarily. We just need to provide timely feedback. If we don't approve them, we don't sign the MOU.
So, yeah, just to add to that too, there'll be an Exhibit A attached to the MOU, which are the 1,000-foot plans for the CCST, which we are approving in concept. And then thereafter, there's construction plans that will implement, and those we have the 30-day comment on. But yeah, we wouldn't sign the MOU unless we're happy with Exhibit A.
Okay, right. Okay. So on the basis which I stated, or is that a base of a resolution? Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to discussion item C, Ridge Street, West Avenue improvements. We've heard some good comments tonight. We've also received many comments by email over the last week. And let me just kick it off with a preamble. Then I'm going to turn over to Rich, who's the liaison to the Public Services Committee and therefore enjoys the opportunity to be the point person from the town council on this project. I think what we've generally heard, and frankly is what we in the council were sympathetic to thinking through, is really three objectives. One is putting in a sidewalk, being able to have a complete sidewalk on Ridge. Parenthetically, there are very few streets in town that do not have a complete sidewalk on at least one side of the street. In fact, I can only think of two others out of all the other streets in the town. So clearly an opportunity here to put in a sidewalk is, on the face of it, something we'd be very interested in, and we've heard that from residents. We've also heard from residents that they don't want to see any narrowing of the street. And we've heard from residents a great deal of concern about the canopy tree and not wanting any stress put on that tree or jeopardizing its safety, and generally being respectful of the families in the two homes, which potentially would have some of their right-of-way used. So those are three objectives. I think it would be apparent that they aren't all readily met together because there's tension among them. And that's one of the things that we're trying to sort out as we think through the different options and how we might go forward. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Rich, to lead off on our thinking.
Since we've got two new members and all of you are tuned, I think, the details of all the machinations of all this stuff. I just wanted to kind of go through with you a summary of where we've been and what we need to decide tonight. A request for the sidewalk on Ridge was received by a resident residing on Ridge Street. And we have a proposal from the town's traffic engineer to widen a portion of West Avenue. Before anything was done in terms of engineering on Ridge Street, Dave Walton of the town staff contacted and met with the homeowners on 4421, 4423, and 4425, and the owners of the new houses under construction to advise them of the request. During those discussions, I believe that Dave informed them that due to the existing utilities and the topography and the tree conflicts and that might occur with the sidewalk, that it would be likely that it would be installed within a portion of the existing pavement, but he didn't have any plans to show them, and it was certainly preliminary. So per our sidewalk policy, we did commission an engineering study to look at the feasibility of doing those things. And it considered the available right-of-way for installation, the terrain, the parking and vehicular impacts, traffic volumes, existing obstructions, utility poles, landscaping, existing trees and the impact on the trees, drainage, and the cost estimate. And the engineering study concluded that the construction of the sidewalk is feasible. The staff then set out 3 options to be considered: placing the sidewalk adjacent to the existing curb, placing the sidewalk entirely on the space taken from the existing street, and thereby narrowing a portion of the street by 4 feet. That was the second one. And a hybrid, which would use about 1.5 feet of the current pavement and 2.5 feet of the town's right-of-way behind the curb to place the sidewalk. And the town staff, of course, preferred the third option, which was the hybrid. The staff memo was placed in the meeting packet for this meeting, which was available to all residents and distributed last week via the town crier. So all those options have been made available to all the residents of the town. And a notice along with a copy of the preferred option sidewalk plan was delivered to the Ridge Street and the West Avenue homes this past Monday. So they just got it a couple of days ago. We have scheduled our discussion tonight to offer our initial reactions to the staff memo and to decide if we want to proceed with the consideration of the request for the sidewalk and the widening of the street. And if so, what might be the next steps? This can include scheduling meetings with the residents to review plans and to potentially ask the staff to respond to those questions. And as was stated in the notice that staff distributed to the Ridge Street residents, we will only be in a position to take action and vote on the plan for a sidewalk after we've had a public hearing. So we meet with the residents, listen to them, develop whatever we're going to develop as a final option for our public hearing, schedule the public hearing, and then at the in a future time, make the decision of whether or not we want to go ahead or not. We're also discussing tonight whether to proceed with consideration of a proposal from the town's traffic engineer to widen a portion of West Avenue. That recommendation was made following a review of complaints received from residents about the congestion in the block and the difficulty turning from Ridge Street onto West Avenue during school dismissal. This portion of West Avenue is a few feet narrower than the rest of the street. So it essentially narrows down at that point. If we wish to proceed with this proposal, we'll also decide tonight on appropriate next steps. Following the public hearing and consideration of any written comments provided in response to the public hearing, the town council will then make a final decision as to the construction of the sidewalk and the widening of the portion of West Avenue. Okay.
So open it for comment from my colleagues. Different proposals. Yep, sure.
I do have a question, and maybe I should know this and I missed it in the packet. But what was the specific origin of the proposal you just talked about, the one that has to do with narrowing West Avenue? What was the origin of that? You mentioned complaints. How did that come to be?
Dave, that might be a good segue for Dave to come up and give a bit of a background and overview yourself of some of this. It'd be very
Sure.
helpful. Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess periodically over the years, and it's possibly exacerbated by the construction of the house in the corner, we've gotten complaints that when the pickup and drop up queue for the Oneness School is parked on the west side of West Avenue, which is something we put in place, I think, in 2018. That when there's a car parked on the east side of West Avenue, it's very difficult to actually get a car through there because of the width of the road where it narrows. And so when I was out actually looking at the sidewalk request that we gotten, the construction was also ongoing and we gotten a complaint. So I asked the traffic engineer, hey, can we do anything about this congestion that we get calls about periodically? And he said, well, why don't you just move this curb next to this grass median and widen the road just enough to allow a through travel lane when cars are parked on both sides. And that's the genesis of the request.
Dave, another question for you. I know that there's been lots of discussions with the Oneness School over the years about just the pickup and drop off traffic patterns, and but the council has not met with anyone from the Oneness School to just kind of further explain that this is kind of causing issues on all ends. Has there been any progress at all about thinking through and being imaginative about how that drop off and pickup can be made more efficient?
Yeah, we put a new traffic plan in place. We made it a school zone, like I said, as part of a public services committee effort.
Yep.
A few years ago. I think I think enrollment at the school keeps growing, and I think there's just more traffic that is sort of overwhelming the block. And I don't know that there's been any conversations with the school about how to mitigate that beyond, enforcing our parking permit regulations, which has come up with, the teachers over there and some of the parents dropping kids off. But beyond those conversations, there hasn't been a more comprehensive study.
Okay, so I don't know if that's something for us to consider in tangent with thinking about, off-duty police presence there as we have for Chevy Chase Elementary School. Is that something under consideration potentially? Because, as I looked at proposal 2, and Dave, you correctly pointed out, it's like a perfect storm of increased enrollment, in this case, construction project going on, and lack of enforcement of existing policies and signage, and that's there. So that's really where I would kind of go first, personally, before undertaking a project, but just in general.
Yeah, even when cars are legally parked with the queue, I mean, there is just a situation where the road is too narrow to
It's too narrow, yeah.
allow it. And I think there was an advantage for many years because the house at the corner was vacant.
Yes.
And so there wasn't a lot of parking demand. Obviously, the construction traffic has increased that parking demand, but I think once that new house is occupied and the brand new house is finished, that also doesn't have on-street parking, I have a feeling that that block on the
Still gonna
east
be
side
the
of West
same.
Avenue is going to have a lot more traffic
Okay.
parking there than they have, for the past 10 or 12 years.
Has there been any pavement markings on proposal 1 been put in, or it's just been kind of a discussion?
Yeah, for the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we build the sidewalk, I think it probably makes sense to put a crosswalk across West in that intersection. if we also widen the block of West Avenue by removing the curb, that would provide a chance to re-pour the curb to create, the pedestrian ramp on the west side to receive the new crosswalk. But we can certainly do that whether or not the curb on West is moved or not.
Okay. Lots to think about. Okay.
Carl?
Well, it seems clear that there are issues here, both on Ridge and on West, that merit exploring solutions. And, I don't know who used the word on the Ridge of finding the Goldilocks solution that tries to sort of thread the needle here. But it seems like these are initiatives worth further study and getting maybe some more details, going through a process of getting a lot of input. Maybe that comes up with additional refinements. So what I'm hearing, I think, clearly is that there are issues that should be addressed. So I'm supporting whatever the next step is to explore those issues in more detail and get more feedback from all the stakeholders.
Very good. You don't have to speak. I'm just giving everyone an opportunity. Okay. I have a few thoughts about each of these. I'm going to talk about them separately. First of all, I think agree completely that we want to engage residents further. In fact, I've had some informal discussion with some of you ahead of time as to whether we could actually plan on a date. And one thought, which we have to confirm, but we may well wish to work on, is Monday evening, the 23rd of June, which would be around 7 p.m. or so. So give over a week away, give you a chance to see it. But if we're going to do that, we would like to see, as I know, Rich, you will not be available, but I hope more of the rest of us could be. And if we have that discussion, that it would be very helpful, and this may be what you were getting at, Irene, that we could actually mark on the road with chalk what would be the size and the length of the bump out that we're talking about, so that people can visually see that. So I think it is very important to have that discussion, and also then to walk over to West Street and actually see what we're talking about in that strip. One letter we received to refer to not taking down trees on West Street, and when I read that, I suddenly realized that there was a lot here that we need to unpack and explain. There are no trees. We're talking about a median strip of mostly dirt, a little bit of grass that would be removed, but there are no trees at all being taken out on West Street if that widening were to go forth. So clearly there's more discussion that we need to have with residents to make them, everyone fully understand what's being involved and considered. So that's a thought, first of all, to start off with in terms of engagement. I think the other thing which I'll say in terms of the three different factors, and I'm just being very personal about this, about the importance and value of sidewalks. As many of you know, my wife is moderately disabled, but a couple of years ago was severely disabled, can barely walk. And when we were going around town with a rollator, it really opened my eyes as someone who's able-bodied to appreciate just how incredibly important sidewalks are to the safety and security of residents. Clearly the fact that we have the sidewalks we have is something which is a tremendous benefit in this town, and people remark on it. They like them, they want them, they really appreciate it. And as I said before, there are very few streets that do not have a sidewalk, complete sidewalk, on at least one side of the street. And here we have an opportunity with really only 4 homes, 2 of which are new. And I frankly have heard, I think, a general consensus that people would be quite happy to see a sidewalk with the existing curb put on that for those 2 homes. So we're really down to a consideration of 2 homes and how that can be addressed. And I'm just saying, being candid, that to me, having witnessed and understood the security and feeling of importance of being able to proceed on a street without having to be on the street, but next to it, is really very important. So it doesn't mean that my vote is inherently in favor of doing a sidewalk come hell or whatever happens to what's required. And I care a lot about canopy trees, but I'm just expressing a view that this is an option that I would really hope that we could find a solution for that could be permitted and gain support. The other point I think is that I appreciate no one wanting the street to be narrowed, but one of the points which is made in the memo, and I've taken the effort to drive on Ridge Street to get appreciation as well as walk this, and perhaps my colleagues have too, is that the effective width of the street for driving close to West Street is wider than the effective width of the street is elsewhere on Ridge, as is true almost everywhere else in town, because once you have cars parked on both sides of the street, you only have a single lane in the middle. But because Ridge Street narrows, there is no parking allowed on the north side of the street for the last 4 or 5 homes. So the narrowing is only a couple of feet, but by knocking out the parking, you've essentially gained 6 feet. So the effective width of the street for driving on is wider at that end than it is elsewhere on Ridge. So when the staff considered what's called the hybrid option of taking 18 inches, it was with the understanding and appreciation that, at least in their view, what would still be left for the street is an area which is wider than effectively is true for the rest of the street. I'm not saying that as a definitive statement. I'm not commenting that as something to be decided. No one's just making any decisions tonight, but I simply ask, and I'm talking to residents here, that this is one factor that at least the staff took into account when they were thinking through the option. So I just want people to be aware that that's part of the background to that option. The issue about the canopy tree is huge, and I think we all five of us share that as being an extremely important matter, and do not want a situation, whatever the solution is, that arises and jeopardizes the health of that tree. So that's something which we recognize we need to deal with one way or another, but that's something we certainly don't want to jeopardize. So those are just considerations. I think it's been very good for us to have heard from the residents who have written in and spoken tonight. We really appreciate it. I think you've heard from us that we are sympathetic to trying to do something, but we don't yet know exactly what the right option is. and we do appreciate the hard work that the town staff and our engineering consultant have done. But we look forward to a review of this, which we'll have to confirm among ourselves, but we'll certainly put out a notice, would be to meet with residents on site on Monday, the 23rd, both to discuss the issue of how to handle the potential for a sidewalk and also discuss the issue on West. So is there anything else that we need to raise at this time?
Just proposal 3. So I know that geographically it's in the same areas what we're talking about, but what I understood it to be was a change in signage.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand, again, is that an enforcement? Even if you change the sign, you still need someone to enforce it. So I'm wondering, is that the reason everything is just being looked at together? Because it seemed to be like, oh, we can slice off proposal 3 more quickly, if you will. So I just wasn't understanding that.
Yeah, I guess it's not directly related to the other requests that came in separately.
Yeah.
I mean, we have gotten complaints about enforcement or a lack of enforcement for the parking regulations over there. The specific request there is to change an existing no parking area into an area that's no stopping or standing.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes it's basically across from the entrance to the school. And so even as it's currently signed, it's legal to actually stop a car there and have somebody come out and get something from the car and go back into the school, or, you know, to stop there to let somebody out. And so the request is just to change that parking restriction to make it more restrictive. The enforcement is a separate issue, because people who stop there generally are stopped and gone very quickly. But it came in and sort of the question is, you know, does the council want to pursue that either through a public hearing, or is it a de minimis change and we can go ahead and change the signage and see if,
And I do want to add that the way it is now, if somebody stops there and it's just no parking. So there's no enforcement beyond no parking, but there's no prohibition for people stopping or standing. And so, yeah, so.
But that still would need to be enforced.
Well, no, well, it gives you the ability to enforce, yes, and it still has to be enforced. Without those signs saying that,
Yeah.
he has no enforcement authority.
I wonder, has the Public Service Committee discussed this item and has it come to any conclusion?
No, there's a reason why. The most of the time, the PSC looks at things that really affect the whole town significantly and are fairly complex. This is not one of them. This is not that difficult to, we need to figure out how to solve the problems we've gotten there. We need to do it with the residents. And I think everybody, as Barney said, we really want to look at those three goals and try and find a good solution to them.
Okay, anything else?
So the idea is on hopefully the 23rd, we'll meet, we'll have some pavement markings, some more kind of fleshed out, but it'll be to hear from the residents
Exactly.
on site, or will it be
On site. No, I think we'd like to do it right there.
on site?
On site,
Okay.
right at Ridge.
Right at Ridge.
And then walk
Okay.
over to West. Yeah. let's
Dave,
do it
and
on
I
site.
would, please include not just the markings of where a bump out would be, but put some street widths at various places along the street so
Mhm.
people can understand what we're talking about when we say, even if we took a foot and a half, it's still the same. It's still the same width as it is at the bottom of that street.
Yep.
So we want them to see the whole picture.
Sure.
Deborah, it looks like you wanted to add something.
So we'll look at proposal 3 along with the other 2.
Are we looking for approval? I find we could move on that.
Yeah.
We do not need a public hearing for that, or do we?
We should.
For 3?
Yeah.
Oh.
He can do that because it's not that.
Todd, do we need a public hearing for number 3?
You do not.
We could potentially take action tonight if we wish to.
I think for me, it's a no-brainer. We need to better the signage there. We need to move it to the extent that we can so that the resident has a good line of sight.
But we don't have to. If you want to wait till the 23rd and review it all together, that's fine too. We
I
can take it
guess
up in July. It's not a big deal.
That's fine. That's fine. That would be.
I would
I'm
suggest we
by the
wait.
stopping.
I'm sorry, what
Yeah,
time?
let everybody look at it.
I would suggest we wait till the 23rd, have everything reviewed holistically, and then make some decisions after that, or continue the process of consideration.
That's fine.
It actually.
Another month isn't going to matter.
It would be beneficial because the suggestion that we narrow that street there has to do with some of the parking on that side too. So there is a
Tie-in.
tie.
I have one more thing to ask, and that is just sort of the overall process for the consideration of the other 2 proposals in terms of just, are we looking at having the meeting on the 23rd and then what comes next?
Well,
And that would be in September?
Short answer is we'll decide what comes next after the 23rd.
Okay.
It's one of the value of flexibility here. I will share that the developer of the 2 new homes is eager for us to come to a conclusion. And because he's actually building and he actually has to set out driveway and driveway aprons. So there's some pressure on his part to get that done. And that's legitimate. But obviously making sure we feel comfortable and the residents feel comfortable is a higher priority. So we will take the time that I think we need to take. If I can speculate on different outcomes from the
Mhm.
23rd, but I wouldn't want to suggest what the timing would be of a public hearing
Yeah.
until we've gotten past that point, and then we'll have to reconvene and talk.
That makes sense. I was just trying to figure out what, in general, it would be depending on the outcome of the 23rd.
Okay, good, thank you. Then we move to the boundary study, just to provide a bit of background context, when we learned that the boundary study was being done and realized the impact on the town, I reached out to some town residents who are very active in the PTSA of Silver Creek, and wanted to make sure that we received some views and could get their input in terms of how the town might be potentially helpful in representing views. And that led to, which I distributed to you, the statement that was posted on the listserv by the president of the Silver Creek PTSA, and also a letter that came in from a town resident, which I've also distributed to you. What I really just wanted to do tonight was just have a discussion to make sure we can come to some consensus for what would be an appropriate degree of involvement and responsiveness by the town council. Clearly, we're not trying to substitute for the direct contact that parents would have themselves in going to their schools, nor for what the PTSAs themselves will be doing in representing their bodies or their constituencies in respect to the boundary study and what the impact on students. But because, and in particular, one of the options so dramatically affects our residents, it just seemed to me that it sort of behooved us to take this issue up and consider it and try to decide how we may feel that it's appropriate to be involved. So that was the purpose of putting it on the agenda. And I open it for discussion in regard to what you may believe is an appropriate way that we may get engaged by letter, by what in any other way that you wish or think appropriate, and roughly what the contents might be. I'm not trying to wordsmith tonight. I would take back your thoughts and work on a draft letter, and then send that around. But I would certainly welcome full discussion of the kinds of things that you might think we should consider putting into a statement.
Do you know if other municipalities are also weighing in on this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I've heard that others are thinking about it, and actually, I believe that Kensington will for sure.
Okay.
Mayor Furman told me that, and I know that Somerset is putting it on the agenda and would like to know our views before they have their meeting, which is going to come up very shortly.
Okay.
So this is certainly a topic of conversation among other nearby municipalities.
Section 3.
Yeah, section 3. Actually, section 5 had it on the agenda, but I didn't say it.
Okay.
Has Section 3 made a decision on what they will?
They're meeting tonight.
Oh, tonight,
So
okay. But you're here instead of there. Thank you, Katie.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very complicated topic, and I don't pretend to understand the whole, I mean, I barely have my head around zoning, so this like whole other beast. So for me, I think just looking at just a high level, these different options, the idea that potentially our residents, our high school residents would not be able to walk to high school is just, I don't understand that at all. Instead be bused very, far away. I just don't understand that. But I don't know enough about the middle school options because they're already being bused far away for their current option with Silver Creek. So I understand fully, though, that people are very passionate about keeping friend groups together, and that makes total sense. But I don't know from a town council perspective where it would fit for us to dive so deeply into all these other issues around the school boundary study. So don't know if the better part of valor is to just if there's an opportunity to provide links to a central area of information, constantly rerun that commercial of, please participate and submit your views to the education board and all that. I don't know if it's, I don't know how it all works to see if there would be even an opportunity for some sort of a public forum where they could come in and talk to bring in the Chevy Chases, have it at next door, or big space that can accommodate a few hundred people if that's something, but I don't know what more we can necessarily dive into. Except to say, yeah, our folks should still be able to walk to the high school across the street from the
Right.
community.
If you feel we need to get something out quickly, I mean, I like your idea about goal setting. We obviously would have some significant interest in keeping, the students in our town have what I'll call a walkable high school. You would hope that the students could be kept in a school group for a significant period of time, not be transferred every 2 years. I mean, I think you could just set some kind of high level things if you wanted to, because it seems to be this is just the first round of their discussion.
An overview of what's gonna,
Oh.
like the timing. if you
Please,
want,
sure.
that
Yeah.
would be helpful. I can
Absolutely.
share. So obviously I've been digging into this and there's still a lot to learn, but this first iteration is 4 options based on 4 factors. And option 1 looks at community continuity. Option 2 looks at utility resources, how buildings are used, how staff is used. Option 3 focuses on equity, which is why I think you see a lot of these like crisscrossy things. So they've taken each of these factors that are desirable, and the 4th factor is transportation, and that's around making a system that is most efficient and makes sense. So this first thing came out, and everyone's sort of looking at it, but it will have another iteration in the fall. So there's a period of public comment. The Board of Education themselves have just had this in the past few weeks. There were NDAs on the analysts that the district imposed, and they only had it a few days before the public did. So there's a lot to be learned still.
Do we know the deadline for initial comments?
No, I don't think that they're there yet. Julie, when I talked to her last week, seemed to indicate that.
Sorry, Julie, who?
Oh, sorry, Julie Yang, the board president, who's also the representative, our representative on the board of ed. So she both is going to be leading this process and representing constituents. So, and I've talked with her about other issues. She's great. She picks up my phone calls. And so there's no, I mean, there will be public hearings throughout the summer. Right now, they're just finishing up some of the school year stuff. So over the summer, but it's not like if you don't get it in next week, you've missed the boat. So don't feel some inherent pressure. But I think it is helpful for communities to weigh in about things like community continuity and that transportation systems that make sense and are fiscally sound, those kinds of things. And this initial cut is good to say, because I think that those are generally things that people believe in, but there's no sense that these 4 options that are currently being shown are something that would be like the final iteration. So
have all the PTAs, to your knowledge, have they all developed drafts of what they want to respond to these?
So we're currently working on that. Silver Creek, I think, is farther along than others because I think that we're in a unique situation with Rosemary Hills because we already bifurcate. There's a few there's like 3 other PK 3-5 schools, but we're the only one that splits into 2 different articulations. So everyone else who's PK2 would also all go to the same 3 to 5. So there's some unique considerations for our community, because what some of the proposals could do if you were to sort of maximize one of these elements over the other is that it would propose to further split some of those children in middle school and further split them in high school. So I think everyone's trying to get a handle on it. And right now, all the PTAs are sort of in like meeting mode and having presentations from people who have followed the data. So we have someone that's coming to talk to the Rosemary Hills PTA tomorrow that spoke with Silver Creek earlier this week. And so still just trying to dig into that data, because the overarching issue of this is that they wanted to alleviate overcrowding, with the opening of the new high school. It is not clear yet if they have done that with these options. So we have to kind of dig into that a little bit, or if it's just Titanic, deck chairs shifting.
Right.
So more to come, but this will go on until next March. So basically is the first cut of recommendations. You can provide comment at any point, and then there'll be another one in September. And again, there will be public comment, and then there will be another iteration in December that comes from the superintendent to the board. And that at that point in January, the board will consider whether to accept that staff recommendation, amend it, or tell them to go back to the drawing board. But then whatever comes from that would be supposedly in March 2026 decided. So just so you know, it's a long process.
Yeah. And the board has public hearings as well.
That's right. So there's going to be a lot of chances, but I don't think there's any harm in inviting someone from the district or Julie to come and be a part of a discussion. She's always happy to do that stuff. Not to speak for her, but she's very accessible. I hope that helps a little.
It does. Or have there been any discussions, obviously not in any of the options, about rethinking how the magnet school system actually is being run, and that in and of itself would be a natural way of equity and socioeconomic diversity and all, because you're focusing on the kids' specific interests and wherever wherever they are coming from in the county. Was there any discussion around that?
That I just don't know. It's a good question, and it's an important one. I think we're just right now as Rosemary Hills, like from the elementary perspective, we're just trying to understand how our kids can maybe stay in some sort of cohort that isn't different all the time. But it is a good question, and one I will pose to our counterparts.
Thank you.
Yep.
We normally do not take comments from the public when we're just having a discussion, but I do see 2 hands up. And since this is such a critical issue, I'm happy to take those comments. So now I see 1 hand up. Cecily, you put your hand up and then down. Are you wishing to say?
I was just taking it down in preparation to then figure out how to unmute myself. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say, even though I'm not there physically in person, I am online, and I am currently the president of the Silver Creek Middle School PTSA. And so to the extent that I can answer any questions, I don't disagree with what was just said in any way, but if there are any questions about Silver Creek and where we are in the process, I can at least generally try to answer those, if those would be helpful. And in terms of the question about the magnet programs, I'm not very well versed in this right now, but at the same time that the MCPS is collecting information and reactions on the boundary study, they've also had a survey on regional academic programs that they've been circulating for several weeks. And the survey itself
is sort of like, which kinds of programs would you like to see, and are we offering enough of them? Like it doesn't really tell you where they are going with it. I have heard a rumor that this might be the beginning of revisiting kind of what sorts of things are offered at which high schools, and that may or may not tie into the magnet system and BCC having an in-house IB program and various things like that. So I think MCPS may be looking at this parallel to the boundary study, but not necessarily as part of the boundary study. And I could try to find out more information on that if it would be helpful to the council. So I just wanted to make myself available for this discussion if that's useful.
Okay. Thank you, Cecily. Appreciate it. One thing you might be able to help with is on the question of the date of when we would need to respond. I take the point that was made that it's a long process, but we also know that the earlier you get in your comments, the better, because a lot of things are shaped, early in the process of revising options, which I'm sure they're prepared to do. But it's one thing to try to have an impact over the next couple of months as distinct from hoping you'll be listened to down the road when things are much more fully developed and much harder to change. So in terms of this first round of comments, Cecily, do you have any view as to when we should try to make sure we're responsive? Taking the point, we don't want to do it tomorrow. We want to do it thoughtfully, but I just wanted to get some better sense of time frame.
So I agree completely with what you just said, Barney, and John is sitting here next to me also saying that it's important to get things in early in the process to be able to have impact. I think what I heard MCPS folks say is that from when they unveiled this a few weeks ago, that it is about a 60-day comment period.
I'm sorry, 50, 50?
60, I believe. I don't want to put money on that, but I believe that it at least goes through the end of this month. And I think what I recall them saying was that come August is when they will start trying to work with all these public comments to refine the options so that then in September, they would present whatever the refined options are. And most of us don't understand at this point when they say refined options, what that means and how much these might change or not change. But while it won't get to the Board of Education for many, many months, my personal feeling and the feeling that our special committee that we have at the Silver Creek PTSA addressing this is best to make any points we care strongly about now so that those can be heard and maybe have an impact come August when they move into the refining process.
Okay. Now, meaning over the next couple of weeks or something like that.
Yes. I mean, I think ideally this month, and again, I could get back to you or back to
That's fine.
to
That's
Todd
fine. I
about
just want to make all I really want to know is that if we're mulling it over and thinking about it, I didn't want to miss a deadline, so I just want to be careful. Okay, David. I don't know David who, but David, your hand is up. We'll entertain a follow-up question.
Yeah, and I'm Jessica. I'm David's wife.
Okay.
And sorry to not be there in person. I'm under the weather. But
Jessica, your full name, please, and address.
Rosenberg, Jessica Rosenberg at 7704 Chatham Road.
Okay, thank you.
So a quick answer to the when our survey responses due. I did reach out to MCPS to ask this specifically because they haven't publicly stated it. And they wrote back to me and said mid-July. So personally, I flagged it the way you all have, which is I should probably get it in sooner so it's actually listened to. But the technical formal answer is mid-July. And I guess I just wanted to share my perspective as a resident with kids in the MCPS system. We have a daughter in kindergarten at Rosemary Hills right now, and a son who's a couple years younger who will start in the school system soon.
Jessica, forgive me,
Yeah.
but are you able to turn on your camera so we could see you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So when I attended one of the meetings that talked about the different options, it hadn't actually occurred to me that we could be so heavily impacted. And I was really surprised by option 3, I do understand what they're going for with that option, but the more I started to think about the implications, the more anxious I felt about it. And just starting to picture going from, for us, a half-mile walk to a 6-mile bus ride, and a bus ride where there's multiple stops because you're picking up multiple kids, like a 45-minute commute here and back, and having to get up an extra, half hour early, wait out in the cold and the dark and the rain. And like, what happens with activities at night if the kids are participating? How are they safely able to get home? So I just, as one individual MCPS, family, I felt like my voice is very small. And so I just wanted to attend this meeting and say I'd be very grateful for the town council to put something together that just kind of gives a sense of the impact potential to us. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that comment. Well, since open the floor, I'll let one other person speak, but please come to the podium.
I'm Ginger Falk, 4402 Elm Street. I just want to thank the mayor and the council for taking up this issue and talking about it. Very, very important, not only to the parents in this community, but I also want to raise this is not just an issue for parents. This is not just an issue for those with kids. This is not just an issue for PTSA. This is not just an issue of friends getting bust around and losing their friends. This is a very important issue to all homeowners in Chevy Chase, because don't underestimate the importance of school zoning and the house buying process. And if Chevy Chase, the town of Chevy Chase, is no longer zoned to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, you're going to see those property values diminish. I'm not an expert in that. I don't know how much they will, but I know that there will be not only people leaving the community because they purchased here for the purpose of sending their kids to BCC and walking distance, but fewer people wanting to live here. So I really thank and encourage the council to continue to stay very apprised of these issues, to stay on top of it on behalf of the residents of all ages, shapes, and sizes, and to continue to provide forums for the town residents to be informed on these issues and to be heard on these issues. Thank you.
Any other comments at this time from my colleagues?
I was just ask a question. Years ago, when Silver Creek Middle School was coming to fruition, was there an opportunity for, the MCP, I'm assuming MCPS reached out to explore boundary changes, and I wondered if any of that came to the town, because it was previously Westland Middle School, right, that our town residents went to, and it's just, if there any precedent here, we should be
Yeah,
aware
I think it
of.
goes back to 2016, if I'm not mistaken, as to when the shift occurred where our students went to Westland and were moved to Silver Creek. So goes back a ways. In several of these proposals, the students would essentially go back to Westland and no longer be at Silver Creek, right? Sure.
I do have a comment. And I know we'll continue to discuss this, but I see the value of having walkability for the students and being able to walk to school, and also for the connection to the surrounding community, which, I mean, even though my son didn't go to BCC, we know we sort of enjoy the BCC jazz band when they come to our events, and we, participate in the fundraisers for the various athletic groups, et cetera. So there's that sort of community continuity and link, but also it sort of seems strange to me that we're, with the options that involve traveling to far places, that it's sort of against sort of the sort of environmental concerns that we sort of discuss, where we're trying to have a walkable community in other contexts. So anyway, that was my comment.
That's the 15-minute community that we've been hearing about since Thrive Montgomery 2050. Exactly.
I appreciate the comment from Jessica that with that kind of commute, what that would mean in terms of wake up times and getting kids to school and then activities, it's really serious. If I may make a proposal, I think there's more thinking we're all going to want to do about this. My own gut feeling is that we as a town should express principles. That saying what we're in favor or opposed to a specific option takes us into the weeds in a way that we don't really know enough about, but also doesn't necessarily really capture the core interests of our town. I mean, you could be against a single option and they say, okay, we won't do that option, but then we'll still do this other option. That other option may also have its defects. So I feel as though intuitively we're stronger if we express principles. One of those principles being clearly couched in a way that makes clear that particularly option number 3 is something that we are not going to be happy about at all. What I think is and I'm just saying this having read the letters that have come in and had a conversation, I think what is less clear to me is exactly what are the principles involved in respect to middle school. Because if I understand it right, all the other options keep all the town residents going to the same middle school, but they move them. They move them from Silver Creek to Westland, which after all, once upon a time they attended. And the busing is virtually the same in both places. So I think I'd like a better understanding of the principles that would be appropriate for us to cite in respect to concern about our kids being shifted in their middle school years. Whereas I think for the high school, it's crystal clear. But I'd like to sort of muse on that a bit and perhaps send something around for consideration, and also perhaps reach out to some of the parents and try to get a better understanding about those issues, and then come back and show something to you in another 10 days or so, something like that. But it just takes some time to think through. But I think I take the point that we should try to get a letter in by the end of the month. I think that's the goal here, that we should try to do something. And I think absolutely send it to, now that I had not appreciated that the chair of the Board of Education is our local representative, so that's good to know. And we should take advantage of that, but obviously make sure our letter is available to other authorities as well.
I also wondered, and I think Irene brought this up earlier, about some possible, I don't know, forum or listening session or something, because you mentioned that Julie Yang would be happy to come talk to residents. So I don't know if that's, would that be something of help?
I think it's a very good idea, but I'd like to hear more from parents in the PTSAs as to whether they'd like that and whether the town should organize it. We obviously could, but I think we'd like to know that that's what the people who are the most directly involved and are thinking most deeply about these issues. I'd like to get some sense from them of how they'd like that to be staged and proceed before we just reach out. So, but I'd be happy if we can facilitate or help, if that turns out to be an action that parents would like. I think we should absolutely, you're absolutely right, Tambra, we should take up on that and sponsor it. But I would like to hear from others that are engaged. Okay, thank you for that. The last item, just a quick update on Bradley Lane safety.
I'm sorry, so we are going to rerun the commercial about the boundary. Make sure everyone get
the next good
do some more
idea.
Standalone email, standalone town criers.
We can send out a town crier this week, reminding people to send in to fill out the questionnaire and send it in. What we did before, Nick, was, actually the way that it was set up on the website of the Montgomery County Public School System, you had to go to a page, and at the bottom of the page, you had to see the link to take you to the survey. The way Todd set it up in our town crier, the link to the survey is directly in front of you when you open up the first. You don't have to go through 2 pages. You see the link directly. So we'll be glad to send that around again this week, and perhaps we'll do it yet again. Okay. Rich, do you want to say a few words? By the way, I don't think we have to spend a lot of time because we have sent everything in the minutes to all, the whole council has it. So I think we're all pretty well up to date on where things stand. But is there anything else you'd like to add? No, but the meeting we had was after our last council meeting. The meeting we had with SHA.
Yes.
So that was what was new. But all I'm saying is that we've distributed the minutes from that meeting to everybody. So there's not much that we have to necessarily update further our colleagues.
No, we essentially, we're still, we're waiting for SHA's responses to things like, what are they going to do with the traffic camera situation? They had a meeting with some of the they actually physically did a field visit and looked at Bradley Lane and the sidewalks and everything there. We haven't heard back from what that field visit accomplished, but they did meet with some of the residents while they were on that field visit. So we're essentially still waiting on the SHA for responses to a lot of these things. That's about it. Dave, can you think of anything else? I didn't.
No, we haven't.
was
They
the
were going to
other-
meet in June, this being June. So maybe that's something you guys could follow up on and see when they're meeting. The only thing I guess I think would be important to add into for the purpose of of the town reporter that's going to go out tomorrow morning. I think we ought to just quickly summarize that it was actually a very positive meeting in terms of SHA taking the issue very seriously.
And within a week, they sent a field team.
And I think that is the additional thing to note, which is they've already sent a field team out to look at Bradley, and they've met with residents who joined the discussion.
Yes.
So they are, and we've gotten extremely cordial and prompt responses to everything that's gone in. So this is actually been, I think, so far, a sense that they are taking the matter seriously. Todd, you can sculpt that into an appropriate sentence or two for the reporter.
I will. What was the meeting you were referring to?
Oh, it was the Chevy Chase Club. So what Dave was asking is, did we ever hear back from Chevy Chase Club on the retaining wall?
Thanks. Okay, I'll follow up with them.
All right, good. Thank you. Is there anything else that we need to go over? All right, good. Well, see you on some of you on June 23rd and see you otherwise on July 9th. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.